keep your eye on it. We've had a bunch of weird stuff happening. I mean, I've just had obviously a lot of powerful people that are not exactly pleased with what I got going here. And so like when I called into Red State Radio or I tried to do like the interview number 2 with them, they had their phone lines get DDoSed by a
Really?
bunch of robo dialers and were just jamming it up so I couldn't. So
That's
just
incredible.
all kinds of stuff like that we've been dealing with. So no worries at all.
Okay, very good. Well, we're recording now, so I'll keep my eye on it. If something happens, I'll let you know. But let's get this in before they knock us off here. So let's do this. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Way of the Truth Warrior. My name is David Whitehead, and I am very happy to be here with you once again. Today is a very special interview that I'm going to be doing with a gentleman that I just recently came across online. One of my amazing followers passed his name to me as I was asking the internet for QAnon, the whole thing. I'm going to be talking today to Austin Steinbart, and I'm going to allow him to do an introduction on himself. We're going to be going through all of that with you as to who he is and getting his take on this. But just a little bit about me, Austin. And first of all, welcome to the show. A little bit about me. I've been researching, all kinds of things in the conspiracy world and the geopolitical world, getting into the world of the occult, studying comparative religion and mythology, pretty much everything that we're not allowed to talk about anymore on the internet. Although we're all hoping that Trump's smack across social media's face there will help that effort to allow us to keep talking about these things. But I've been into this stuff for about 18 years. For me, it was just a passion. I want to know the truth. I want to find out what the hell's going on in this crazy world. And it was recent. It was probably about a year ago that somebody said, "Hey, have you ever heard of QAnon?" And I was like, "No, I haven't." I heard about Anonymous, and I wasn't super pleased with it, how it worked out. And so, I just kind of didn't have time to look into it. And then it was about 5 months ago that somebody actually sent me some of the Q posts. And I started looking into them. And then I got recently hooked up with the whole pushed app because I live in Canada. So we have to do it a certain way here in order to get access to the posting board. And I've been doing as much research as I possibly can on Q and on all the things that have been posted. And I'm still new to it. So bear with me here, folks, and also yourself, Austin, as I try to, get through these questions. I really want to do justice to this interview and give you a platform to go through your story, give your take on the whole thing, give your take on what's happening in the world. And we're going to do our very best to try to validate everything we talk about here. And one thing I was impressed with when it came to Q was that the main vibe of the entire thing wasn't the same as what I've heard before, which is typically, it becomes like a religion or a cult. And even people today on the internet are calling Q a new cult. And I think maybe elements within the Q movement have become cult-ish, which I know you've been calling people out on. But the main point that I've seen is always, don't just read what we're posting, research what we're posting, follow it yourself, look into it yourself. It's all about the truth. And, my first instinct was, oh, is this some kind of a psychological operation to deceive us? Is this another Illuminati mind control job or something like that? But, the more I looked into it, the more I was impressed by first of all, the information that was been put out. I then came across your videos, and I've been through your entire YouTube channel, I think 3 or 4 times. I've also been following up on the interviews on the Baby Q channel. And I've also been listening to the interviews by some of your detractors. So I'm trying to get as informed as I possibly can on the whole thing. That's where I'm coming from, Austin. I'd like to get into who you are, what your take is on Q, and kind of start from there. So welcome and take it away, Austin Steinbart.
Well, thanks for having me. And yeah, so kind of what you said. People ask me the same thing. What is Q? Is Q a cult? Is Q whatever? And it's like, well, if it's a cult, it's the only cult that's ever told people to research and think for themselves. And then I get another question. Oh, this is a psyop, isn't it? And it's like, yeah, absolutely. This is a psyop. It's a psyop where we kind of spook everybody into kind of moving the needle on some very important issues by just telling them the truth, because the truth is so shocking and appalling that really that's all it takes at this point. So a big part of this, the Q movement originally, was to create back channels, information back channels, to help contextualize what was happening in the United States And at the time, what was happening was the FBI and the CIA and elements of our government were in the process of trying to frame our president for treason with this Russia thing.
Right.
And so it really, it was apparent that a back channel is needed, that the news is never going to tell us the truth. That, I tell a lot of my conservative friends, if you go to Fox News, a lot of times Fox News is over there having people pushing Russiagate, right? Pushing a treasonous coup against our country. So we really needed these back channels. And so it's been this drip nurture campaign to inform the public and to kind of contextualize the events as they're happening in real time.
We're just talking, Austin, about what Q is. Like, I've got so many friends emailing me and messaging me on a regular basis. It seems a lot of new people are coming to this Q thing on a regular basis, especially as events are unfolding. You were talking about how this is a back channel communication system because of the problem with the media. I'm assuming that this has...
Yes.
So go ahead from that point.
I was going to say, so QAnon is a off-book, unofficial military intelligence operation designed to inform the public, like contextualize what's happening in real time, and to help lay the psychological groundwork for some dramatic sweeping changes that we are desperately in need of. And so it's like we're spooking you into action by telling you the truth. That's kind of the basis of it. And it uses quantum technology to facilitate this. So future kind of time warping technology to be posting things from the future onto boards in the present. And that's how so there's a lot of fuss made about like the timestamps and the trip codes and the timing of tweets. And really the only way it's possible to get the timing that tight is to be using quantum computing. So it's a very interesting and complicated operation that is somewhat dynamic, and it's designed to unite the country and to kind of move us in the right direction, and to help us see that we're being actively pitted against each other, divided. We got coups being staged against our president by our intelligence agencies, and so there's just all kinds of stuff that's really out of control. And so this is a good back channel to like start trying to seize control of the narrative from the media, who's taken us so far awry.
Well, and that's the thing. I agree with you on the media. I've spent years laboring here in Canada, where our media is even worse, to try to warn people about that. And especially when it came to the whole Trump thing. I had my questions with Trump in the beginning. Absolutely. Like anybody, I've been watching politics from a distance because it's been so corrupt, no matter where you look, for so long. I don't blame people when they have trouble trusting politicians. And because of all the grievances with intelligence agencies, with so many of the things that I know you talk about and so many others do, and the entire Q project does talk about, because of that, a lot of people have trouble even taking Q as something that's serious. And I can see that. So one thing that you did say was the word artificial. Are you talking about AI?
Yes. So Q plus, the future Space Force commander or the future head of the Space Force, is using the quantum internet and some really beefed up AI to post messages to boards in the present. And it's the only way that we could really legally get away with kind of leaking on operations in progress. The legal loophole reason there is the fact that it's someone in the future reflecting back on the past. So you're technically, when the person that's doing it is doing it in the future, they aren't necessarily leaking on operations in progress. They're reflecting back to what happened in the past. So it's the reason it has to be that way is so we don't set any dangerous precedents with our intelligence agencies, like that it's okay to subvert them or to leak on operations in progress, right? So we don't want to set the precedent that a future president, right, maybe another corrupt person gets in there and they don't like, how the United States is going. And so they manipulate that for their own end and they start leaking on intelligence operations and we have a bunch of dead spies, right? So it's a way to get the word out there without setting precedents that are going to destroy us later.
Yes, and wow. Okay, so right off the bat, we're into talking about, basically posting to the quantum internet from the future. This for a lot of people is going to be quite mind-blowing and maybe difficult to believe, and it might just be because of, again, the lack of education in the public about what the quantum internet really is, what AI really is, how far ahead I guess the military and the intelligence community is in their technology. Let's get into that in a little bit. I'm going to pause on that because I think that's a huge can of worms to open. Let's get into. So we talk about what Q is. Essentially, it's an intelligence operation, and which intelligence agency is conducting this operation? Is this the CIA? This is not the CIA, is it?
So this is an off-book DIA thing. So the DIA was started in the early 60s by John F. Kennedy, and the reason was he realized that our CIA was totally out of control. So they were, subverting his will of the commander in chief, right? Not obeying the chain of command, and they were just doing all kinds of shady things. And he was getting really upset with that, and he realized that we need a primary intelligence agency that's organized under the Department of Defense instead of the Department of State. Because the State Department, when you're in the State Department, you're a bureaucrat and you have the same rules, like it makes you almost impossible to fire, and there's just a lot of entrenched corruption in there. When you're under the Department of Defense, you have to report to the president. That's just how the president can fire you at any time for any reason, even because he feels like it. Obviously, that wouldn't be good, but. So it was put out there, or it was created by President Kennedy to be standing up a spy agency that could one day supplant the CIA. And obviously, when they realized that's what was happening, he was abruptly killed.
Right.
But the DIA has continued, and so I think a big distinction to make here is a lot of people are asking me, what's my rank? What's this? What's that? And the structure I've been operating in is a parallel structure to the traditional DIA. So it's the off-book COVID operations wing of it, if that makes sense. And so if you look in the records, you won't find any record of me. Otherwise, I'd been killed a long time ago, just like the other COVID operatives. But this is a DIA thing, and it's designed to get rid of the CIA.
Which is why we see so many posts exposing the CIA and many, many other agencies and families. And we're going to get into the royal death cult, the death racket, as you call it. And so as we go down the line here. But so basically, we've got a defense intelligence agency that was set up by JFK to combat the corruption of the CIA and the forces that were already culminating in the U.S. to basically, I guess, take it over from within and move it into a direction that was not in the best interest of Americans, correct? And then Q was an intelligence operation conducted by the DIA to be a back channel for the public to be able to communicate what was going on from behind the scenes. And this was done because, number one, if you can keep the public informed, then you can garner more support. Is that it? Because I guess a lot of people think of this as, well, why would the intelligence agencies need the public to be a part of this operation, essentially?
Because so one of the ultimate goals of this operation is to lay the public opinion groundwork to be disbanding the CIA. Obviously, there's some good spies. We still need good spies, so rolling them into DIA, but disbanding the CIA, disbanding the FBI, and pulling the Space Force out of the Air Force and reallocating the other Air Force resources, integrating them back into the other branches of the military. So if you're a president, especially a controversial one like Trump, and you were to just come wave your hand and try to do that, you would have, just like more normal propositions, bureaucrats at every level trying to sabotage you, leak on you, and then you'd have a public that would be really freaked out, right? The Democrats have been really trying to cast him as this like orange Hitler that's coming in there, and he's going to do a fascist takeover.
Right.
So it's really been their attempt to try to lay the public opinion groundwork for him not to be able to do that. And so this, when we do, go to make these sweeping changes, if people don't understand what's happening, then they're going to think this is, a consolidation of power as opposed to a peaceful and much needed revolution.
Right, because I mean, there's been many of us from the outside that I mean, again, I live in Canada, so when I look at America, I see honestly that whatever happens in America will either plague or uplift the rest of the Western world. So when we see these things happening, we're always hoping that some change will come to America. American politics, from my perspective, has been corrupt for so long, and we're all hoping that Trump is what he says he is, and that there is somebody in there, and there are all these white hats. We've heard rumors of white hats working behind the scenes for a long time in these different projects. So we're all hoping it. And I guess for me, I've had my heart broken so many times, Austin, in this movement, hoping for saviors and organizations to come together and leaks of information. And, you're always hoping for it. But maybe, some of us have been let down so much that it's hard for us to just blindly trust, this new president, to trust, someone such as yourself or the Q movement. It's hard. But I got to tell you, I hope that it's real. And so let's get into that. Let's get into who you are, Austin. I mean, there's a lot of battling that I've noticed that's happened in the Q movement. You brought it up in many of your interviews that there are possibly well-intentioned people that have gotten sort of stuck in their own opinions and in the way that they see the Q movement working. But there could also be other infiltrations that have taken place. Maybe you can comment on that. But what is your role in this entire Q project?
So my role before a few months ago was primarily about intelligence gathering and, mixed up with people in person, kind of spreading the news through human networks. And now it's my role is to come out and to just be, extremely honest with everyone, and to be kind of connecting the dots here, right? Because a lot of the stuff on the board, it's small pieces of a big picture that it's painting, but it's not, super clear who exactly or what exactly they're always talking about. So I'm coming out and I'm saying, here, this is who I am. This is what I've been doing. This is how I know that what the deal is here, and just connecting the dots, right? Instead of saying the cabal or the Illuminati or, these kind of vague catch-all terms, to pinpoint and say specifically it's this organization called D6, which is the Black Ops wing of the CIA. And specifically, our problem is that D6 has been overtaken by the royals who run Europe. Right. So
you're saying there's a relationship between the CIA and MI6?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So the CIA and MI6 have always been kind of like intertwined at the hip. If you recall, the CIA, the precursor to the CIA called OSS, was created when we were going into World War II. And it was essentially MI6 coming over here and teaching our spies how to be spies from scratch, building the OSS from scratch, helping recruit the people they wanted. And they were helping win the war. And when the war was over in 1947, the OSS was reorganized into the CIA. And these, I would say, out of control kind of covert operations wings of them have been continuing, right? So kind of a thing of the past. They've been continuing into the future, and they are really causing a lot of problems for us now. And we're kind of at a precipice, at a breaking point of where we can be breaking out of that.
Well, I hope so, man. I pray for it every day. So who is actually posting on the Q board? Like, I've got the pushed app here. I've got, the Q posts that are coming in. I got to say, half the time I read these things, I'm super excited about it. I'm like, really? They're blowing the whistle on the royals? Really? They're going after the Vatican and the Jesuits? Really? They're going after the pedophile networks and the MS-13 gangs and the drug cartel? Really? Like, because we've known about this for a long time in the research circles. And then I see Q posts every day that are coming out and talking about it, and then, talking in tandem with current events, and you can correlate it with Trump's tweets. And there's this whole Q clock thing. Who's actually posting on the Q board?
So this is going to sound really wild. This is facilitated by that quantum internet I was talking about, but that's actually me posting in the future. But I'm using a quantum AI that you can kind of tone down the personalizing phrases. You can do all kinds of wild stuff with it. So in the future, I have my head tied into kind of this God mode computer, for lack of a better analogy, and it's me plus this AI conducting, kind of like feeding hints to all the various parties involved and posting the stuff on the board.
That's incredible. I mean, I can't help but think that this is something out of a movie or something like that. And I can honestly, I mean, when you say, okay, this is it's an AI quantum computer system where you are posting in the future to the present. Is it like Time Cop with Jean-Claude Van Damme, where you got to get in one of those ships and then hit the time warp, go into the future, do the post, come? I mean, or is it a little bit more based on the technology?
It's more like, it works more like if you've ever seen the movie The Frequency with Dennis Quaid, where he used like a radio and he has the same kind of thing going, except this is just like an instant messaging or like a posting on various internet forums service.
Wow. Okay. That's a good example. So, and I'm just trying to explain this to my listeners here, because I've been reading up on it and listening to your interviews, and it's just, I'm still trying to wrap my head around it. So we're in the future. It's a posting from the future into the present. So this brings up the question of time, which, I mean, I do a lot of philosophy on my show. We talk about the question of time. What is time? Is it linear? Is it not? So what would be your understanding of time, so that we can explain this to people that, because I mean, aren't there different timelines? Is the future deterministic? Is there still some kind of free will or action that needs to be taken? And if it isn't taken, it changes the future. How does that all work?
So starting with the first question there, time is a dynamic force controlled by gravity. So the simplest example I can give is satellites right now flying through space. We have these GPS satellites.
Right.
And time at high altitude moves slightly faster than time while you're standing on the ground. And it's because when you're standing on the ground, you're closer to the core of the Earth, and gravity is gripping you slightly tighter, so you're experiencing time slightly slower. And so this time dilation concept, like as in the difference between the rate at which these satellites are experiencing time and the people standing on the ground are experiencing time, is a factor that has been built into the programming of GPS since its inception. So time dilation as a concept has been around for a very long time in the science circles and the engineering circles. And so another example of that would be, I don't know if you've seen that movie Interstellar with, maybe it's Matthew McConaughey.
Yes.
I could be wrong about that. Don't get me wrong.
Right.
Actors are never my thing. But so he goes to this gigantic ocean world, and he's there for like 2 days, and he comes back and it's like 30 years later.
Right.
So the idea of like different size planets experience time at a different rate. Like if you were to go to a planet twice the size of the Earth, if it was built the exact same, time would go half as fast. So that's a very simplistic way to put it, but just it's a really wild concept.
So time is basically subjective to us on this planet, and because all we see is our life and our timeline on the planet, we think that's the only time that exists. But really, time doesn't really operate like that, because it's based on the mass and the gravity and all these different things you're talking about, based on where you are in the universe and all that, right?
Exactly. So our sense of time is calibrated by not just the Earth's gravity, right, but also the Earth is in the gravitational field of the sun, right? And so the sun is a factor. Then the sun and our solar system is in the gravitational grip of the galaxy that we're in, right? And so all of those factors, right, the black hole at the center of our galaxy, or the sun in our solar system, the Earth, those are all the calibrations that make up how we sense gravity.
Wow.
So it's one of the reasons that, for example, one of the things perplexing scientists right now is they look at this dark matter in space, and they really spooked them out when they first saw it, because this dark matter is like, it looks like it's expanding at a speed that's faster than the speed of light.
Right.
Right. And so, in traditional physics, like how can that happen? Right. Nothing can go faster than the speed of light. And the reason is that time dilation concept of that, they have no gravity out in deep space to be grabbing them and slowing them down. So they're experiencing, the dark matter is experiencing time at a, mind-bogglingly faster rate than we are here on the Earth. And so where that applies to quantum computing is, so quantum computing, a quantum computer, it doesn't run off of silicon and electricity like traditional computers do. It runs off of lasers and graphene. So graphene is graphite shaved to a one atom thick layer. And graphene has this really weird property of when you electrify it, it loses all of its mass. So if you think back to the physics problem of where there's a book called, I think it's A Brief History of Time by Stephen Hawking, I want to say. And so in there, it's a concept where they're discussing time travel and how it's theoretically impossible, because if you're in a craft, like according to traditional physics, it's theoretically impossible. Because if you were in a vehicle, right, the amount of force it would take you to propel you forward, because for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction. So the amount of force it would take you to propel you faster than the speed of light in a vehicle that has mass in any way would be infinite, right? You would never be able to get enough force to propel yourself that fast. So the only way to escape that limitation is to excite something to excite this graphene to a quantum state. And when they do that, it loses its mass. So it behaves as if there is no mass. And so it escapes that traditional constraint on movement.
Okay. And so basically this quantum computing technology is based on this principle. And this is essentially, we're talking about time travel, but are we talking about, like, I mean, maybe you can't even disclose this.
Yeah. So the best way, it's like a time warping computer. And I know a lot of people look at me weird when I say that.
Okay.
And even a lot of journalists that report on it, because it's funny because they like to say a lot of these vocabulary words that they read, but they don't realize that means it's a time warping computer. So it's the only way that, like, Google has this quantum computer, for example, that they are able to take a problem, this unbelievably huge simulation problem that would take all of the other supercomputers on Earth combined hundreds of thousands of years to solve. And they're able to just blow through that in like 3 minutes.
Google has this.
Right. So Google has this right now. And that's a commercial technology, not a military technology. So you can only imagine where the military is at.
How far ahead would you say they are in terms of years for technological development?
I would say 30 to 40 years is the traditional answer, but in a couple of cases that are extreme situations, they might be a little bit further ahead than that.
Wow.
I can't say exactly.
Yeah, no.
And of course, this technology exists, and I have a lot of traditional soldiers and spies making fun of me, like, oh, we know exactly how it works. It doesn't work like that. We don't have anything like that. It's like, well, not in the official, like, traditional government, right? There's parallel structures with both the CIA and the DIA that are cultivating these future technologies that are totally classified to the public and totally off book. So it's going to be really interesting when, as we're bringing this all out into the open and just explaining what it is.
Yeah. So we're going to get to that point where disclosure of this technology is going to come out to everybody.
We are. We're trying to lay the groundwork for that right now.
Okay.
And it's an interesting job. I wasn't terribly excited about going public. That's what so there's a lot of people in the Q movement. They're really upset with me.
Right.
Because I upset their notion of, who Q was. I think they were expecting, an old man or like a Jesus Christ type of a character coming down from heaven.
They were thinking of that guy in The Matrix, the architect with the guy with the white beard. That's what they were probably thinking.
Yeah,
that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, well, that I gotta say, I was just going to say, Austin, that you are, I've tried as a host, because I honestly was just like, guys, I'm trying to learn about this. I don't have all the answers. I don't know if it's true or not. I just want to know. And I reached out to about 4 or 5 different of the top QAnons. I've got their books, and, I've been trying to get out, and none of them got back to me. You were the only one that got back to me. So thank you for that.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. And I think they have a little kind of click going on. So they've decided early on, I think one of them didn't like me. So they decided early on, like, oh, you're not allowed to listen to this guy. So they've been, kind of sour grapes about the whole thing, but it's okay. And I think what they need to realize is, like, I was not terribly excited about, coming out, disclosing my identity, putting myself and my family out there like this. This wouldn't be something I would do unless I really had to, and unless I really, unless this was really just a critical part of getting this mission done at the end of the day. Because a big thing about me coming out right now and connecting the dots is that we've largely, like, kind of peaked out, or had a few months back, peaked out our potential for gaining new people into the movement as an anonymous letter, right? So at some point, somebody's got to come out and say, what's going on here? Who's doing this? What is the real story? Who specifically is this targeting? And so there's just got to be, names, facts, details behind this before it can really become a mainstream thing. And if we don't turn it into a mainstream thing, then we're going to continue living in this cesspit of corruption. So,
well, anybody that wants to shoot some arrows at the cesspit of corruption, I'm in for it. And, I got to say, I've been very impressed. Even though I'm sure there's a lot of people that disagree with me, but I don't really care. I've been very impressed with Donald Trump and the moves that he's been making, especially as of late. It seems like the temperature has really picked up. And there was a lot of criticism in the beginning of the Q movement, based on my understanding of what other people have told me, that, there were these predictions of, like, things like mass arrests, and that certain things were going to happen. And that a lot of people felt let down that it hadn't quite happened. Was there a misunderstanding that was taking place amongst the QAnons, like the people who were delivering the information posted on the board versus what was actually posted on the board? Or is this a war that's happening where both sides are fighting it out, and sometimes timelines change and things have to happen later on? Because I guess I'm just saying that it seems like a lot more of the Q predictions are lining up as of the recent months. But I mean, I could be wrong, because, again, I'm a newbie to all this.
There was definitely, influencers who got out a little bit over their skis there, and maybe made some predictions that didn't quite come true, and that certainly did lose us a little credibility. But for the most part, the board is intended to be, kind of read for yourself and seen as is. And so it's not 100% true, right? There's some elements of disinformation in there. Because if we told everybody publicly exactly what was going to happen right off the bat, then it would be really easy to stop. Right. But for the most part, it's just contextualizing the big picture story here, and it's laying the public opinion groundwork, helping people see things like these riots. Right, these riots are totally sketchy, and they're totally organized.
Yeah,
and a lot more people are seeing that now as a result of things like
Also, just let you know, on the audio side, first of all, our recording's going great. Just all of a sudden your audio has shifted. It's a bit more muffly now. I don't know if there's a way to get closer to the phone or something. I just want to make sure people can hear you. Let's try this. Test. Can you hear me, Austin? Oh, there we go.
There we go. Sorry, I'm just walking back over here.
Oh, that's much
This flip phone is a disaster.
Oh,
can't wait to be able to use something else.
No kidding. Let's hope that works.
And it's like you got to find, like, the cheapest, crappiest piece of junk that there is, because everything has, internet these days. So
right,
it was hard to even find one. So
would you get, like, the Razor or something?
No, I got, like, this really crappy, like, Alcatel prepaid phone.
Oh, okay. Well, you're sounding good now. Okay, well, because I mean, I was going to ask about the Q proofs, but I feel like there's no way we can possibly go through everything in this interview, and I want to keep moving on. So, I mean, you've done videos on this. I'm going to let everybody know. You can go check out Austin's YouTube channel. It's his name, Austin Steinbart. You can follow him on Twitter. You can also follow the Baby Q account, which I'll link everything below in the description of this video and into this this podcast, so you can check it out. But if you could just say one thing, Austin, to convince people of this story, what would it be?
Well, usually I start with, people are like, oh, you're into conspiracies. And it's like, oh, you're not? Do you believe that Jeffrey Epstein killed himself? Right? Because
Right.
if you're listening to the news, all of them, if you question that whatsoever, you're a conspiracy theorist and you're just crazy. And so it's like, who's really the crazy ones here?
Mm.
The ones looking at obvious facts and evidence and calling out things that are, reek to the high heavens to anyone with half a brain, or the people who are pretending that our country is, works exactly how they tell us it does and that there's nothing to see here.
Well, yeah, you're in good company because I've been labeled a conspiracy theorist for 18 years, and I actually now just wear it as a badge of honor because I think that in this time, in this day and age, given what we know about the media, given what we know about so many past events that I've covered endlessly on my program and in my work, at the very least, people can understand that we need to question what we're told, and even question what we're talking about. And I've always said that on the show. Don't just listen to what I'm saying. Don't just read what I post. Research it. And you've been saying the same thing, Austin, for a long time. And I got a video sent to me when I was talking to somebody about having you on, and they were like, "Oh, check out this interview on, I can't remember the guy's name, Izzo or something, his channel. I think you called in and we're trying to talk to him about Q, and then he just totally spoke over you. He got really emotional, started freaking out. He's like, "Where's the children getting pulled out of the dark underground? And if you don't show me, then they're a shill," and all that kind of stuff. Did you have any
Yeah,
follow-up comments to that whole situation?
it was pretty bizarre. I try to be as polite and tactful as possible,
Mm,
even in the face of adversarial interviews.
yeah.
And he just didn't seem very serious about engaging with the facts, right? And so I think one of the things he needs to realize is that, like, this is a military intelligence operation, right? And that my job of it is in the information ops side, not necessarily the law enforcement going and grabbing people side.
Mm,
And so that's a big thing here. And I was trying to explain to him that, like, a big part of this is that, the CIA is and MI6 are running around starting these child trafficking rings so they can raise money for their rackets, their covert operations, their assassinations. Like when they want to, go arm ISIS in Syria, they get the money from that, from drug dealing and human trafficking. And
really?
the idea is that, so the CIA is and the MI6 is doing that, and the FBI is actively covering up for them, actively looking the other way, actively standing down. Like my cousin is a border patrol agent in Blythe, which is in the between Yuma and Las Vegas, the most active corridor. And regularly, the border patrol agents will be out there about to catch a bunch of drug smugglers or human traffickers, and the FBI will call and stand them down and say,
Really?
"Oh, hey, don't worry about this, we got it."
Wow.
So we have this unbelievably insidious situation going on. And so what I was trying to tell Izzo is that until us, the people, realize what's happening and in large enough numbers to where we can have the public support to be breaking up these organizations that are, structurally corrupt and have been since their inception, that nothing's ever going to change, right? We could go wrap up 1 million human traffickers, and next week there'll be 1 million more if we just let these intelligence agencies run wild like we have in the past.
Right.
So he wasn't quite getting that. He's, he's like a lot of people. They're just like, I just want, everything handed to me right this second, right? I don't want to have to, wait for this. I don't want to have to research. So that's a big problem too that we face with the non-researching sorts of people, which is most people.
Yeah.
And the fact that to even begin to understand what's happening here, it requires a massive amount of context, a massive amount of research, right? And most of it's open source, right? Most of it you can look up on your own, but unless you're interested to go sit there and spend the time and do that, then we're never gonna. You're never gonna be able to absorb the big picture. So we are never going to be able to convince the public at large unless we can learn to simplify this down and explain it in a fast, simple, quick way. And kind of that was what my channel was intended to do, was to take these complicated concepts and to boil them down into as simple language as possible and have it be short and try to, you know, make jokes here and there, just try to make it watchable enough to be, you know, getting the information across, trying to be able, for people to be able to stick with me long enough to absorb the information. And to some degree it worked, to some degree it didn't. And we'll keep at it. We'll keep putting more content out there in the future. But that's the idea, is like trying to take these very broad concepts and boil them down into videos that people can really understand what's happening here. Right. Because I think one of the problems in our movement here is that a lot of the main influencers, what they tell people is like, oh, go look at all the Q posts.
Right.
Right. Oh, you want to learn about this? Go look at everything. And if you don't care that much in the first place, or you're not interested in, you know, going and reading 4,000 or 5,000 posts, then that's not, you know, a very good strategy. So we got to learn to give the 40,000 foot view, to boil it down to as simple terms as possible, and to get out there and be willing to do adversarial interviews and keep explaining until people get it. Right. So I was trying to, with that is a situation, demonstrate that even if I get insulted, even if I have people, you know, saying outrageous things and trying to snipe me, that doesn't change the mission. That doesn't change what we're trying to do. That doesn't upset me at all. And I'm going to push forward and keep explaining this, keep getting the word out. And I hope that the other members of the QAnon movement will do the same thing. So far, they are very sensitive to criticism, and so they won't go anywhere near anything adversarial. And I'm hoping that I can, you know, just emulate the behavior that I'm trying to manifest here, and be getting more of them to be doing that in the future. Even if they haven't watched through all my stuff and still don't like me, you know, half of them think I'm a LARP and half of them think I'm like a infiltrating CIA agent, which is kind of funny because I'm, you know, airing all the CIA's dirty laundry.
Right.
But you know, whatever you think of me, I'm hoping that they can be getting out there more and mixing it up with regular people that maybe aren't involved in this, making themselves open to that criticism, and just kind of taking it on the chin and just keep explaining it until they get it. Right. Because if you know you're right, then, you know, who cares? And I think that Izzo interview, when this is all said and done, is going to be a legendary embarrassment for him. So he, you know, it looks to maybe an outside third party like, oh, he, you know, he got me, or he like acted outrageous and insulted me or whatever. But I know at the end of the day that he's going to deeply regret that. So, you know, I have no problem getting out there, being polite, being respectful, and mixing it up with whoever is willing to talk to me.
Well, and I got to say, in your defense on that, because I was watching it, I was actually watching it with my wife. We went through it, and I was like, why isn't he letting Austin answer the question? Because I just wanted to hear your answer. He would ask the question and you were trying to answer. He kept jumping all over you. And then he just started freaking out and getting emotional. And maybe part of me even identifies with that and understands it, because I'm a father. I got kids. Every time I watch Out of Shadows, and I've been researching cults and pedophile networks and all that stuff independently on my own for many, many years. And that's all coming out now. Everybody's interested in that. And so now that this is hitting the masses who are just used to mainstream media, you know, everything's in 10-second sound bites. All of a sudden they're getting introduced to some very serious, real, and dark, evil shit. Now I can imagine that people are, and we're all locked up in our houses due to this pandemic. So I can imagine that the temperature's boiling. Everybody just wants answers. Everybody wants some clarity, and all of us want to see an end to this corruption. So I can identify with that side of it. But as you were saying, I'm a martial artist by trade. I study, you know, the concepts of strategy and warfare on a regular basis. I've had many guests on the show to talk about it. I know very well that patience is a virtue, and that strategy is necessary, and that you can't. And then also during the middle of a fight or a combat situation, things are going to change. It's dynamic. There's blow for blow. You got to change course here and there. You got to adapt. So it's not going to be as easy as the public would like it to be, where it's all just put out there and the guys are all arrested and there's big pictures of Hillary Clinton and Obama and everybody in jail, and then it's all just said and done and it's ponies and rainbows. This is an ongoing battle for freedom and for truth and justice to be brought back into the proper status once again.
Absolutely. And it's really one of those things that it's the plan is going to work, right? It's one of those things like enjoy the show, but also like help participate in the show. Right, because we need all hands on deck, right? This is set up to be where we can win, right? We have these deeply entrenched elements in our government and in governments around the world that are deeply hostile to everything we stand for and our freedom and our safety and all that kind of stuff. And so we have a mechanism to beat them, but the mechanism is like a crank machine, right? Where it won't work unless we all vigorously crank the machine. So one of the things that I've been a little dismayed about is I've been trying to call out some targets, right? Shine the laser on the right target for the airstrikes to come in. And there's been a lot of resistance to that, even in situations that, normally they would be totally down to go after that target. So I'm
And by
worried
they,
that
sorry to pause you there, but when you say they, are you talking about other people in the DIA or military people?
other people in the Q movement.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah. So we've built this massive kind of information ecosystem, and I would like for us to be starting to use that, and starting to provide the president the air cover he needs to actually make the moves he needs to make, because he's still very constrained in a lot of ways. He's trying not to lose these lefties. He's trying to keep them on board, but he keeps having to pander to these worthless neocons that, always want to be as aggressive as possible, that want to stay in all the wars, that want to expand the intelligence agencies, that want to, degrade our rights. And a big part of that is on the Republican side. A big part of the apparatus that's keeping him on his heels, I'm talking about President Trump on his heels, is the Republican Party. And so that's one of the things I've been trying to say. Look, we got to get involved. We got to get, upset with our fellow Republicans and kind of come out and say, look, if you supported Russiagate, you need to get out of here, right? Because Russiagate was a coup against our duly elected president, and it was supported by all of the key Republicans. That it would have not have gotten off the ground if all of the key Republicans would not have legitimized it and would not have perpetuated it. So there's a lot of treachery in our own ranks, and that's one of the things we need to be doing in the Q movement. One of the targets examples I was given is, look, we got to be helping the president deal with these treacherous Republicans that are stacked all over the place within our own party. And if we just sit around and wait on the board and just kind of like parrot what the board says, then we're not always being the most effective force for change that we can be, and we're not moving the ball in anything.
Right. And then you have all sides of this, especially all the people who don't want to be exposed for the massive corruption they've been involved with, to have all this information come out. So they're trying to stir the pot, as you were saying, with these riots. We've got all this footage of pallets of bricks being dropped off, people in cars with masks on, handing bricks to protesters, trying to inflame violence. It seems like in every way, whether it's the Russia hoax, the impeachment attempts, the attempts to basically block everything that Trump has been trying to do from day one, the incessant attacks from the media are just relentless no matter what he does. One day they're complaining about the fact that he's acting like a dictator when he signs an executive order, but another day they'll say, well, why is he not fixing this? And why does he still have all these people around him that are incredibly corrupt or whatever? And it's like, well, I think the goal here is to make this a decision of the American people, not something that is done dictatorially. Is that correct? Like, that's the whole point.
Yeah, that's definitely a big part of it. And the other big part of it is that the president doesn't have as much control as we're taught or led to believe that he does.
Okay.
In a lot of ways, in a lot of areas, the presidency resembles more of a frozen steering wheel than a power structure. And one of the ways is with our foreign policy. We have a foreign policy establishment that has its agenda, and whether or not that's in line with the will of the people or with the duly elected president, they're going to do what they're going to do. And a great example of that would be this Syria situation where we are trying to get out. President Trump wants to get out. That's what we voted for. That's what he orders. And then they find reasons not to do it. They find reasons to not allow him to do that, to thwart him. And it's totally unacceptable.
Well, and then they make it look like he doesn't want to come out or that he's backpedaling. Like the media will spin the way that went,
Yep. And they'll go as far as to do things like stage those false flag chemical weapons attacks. Because I don't know how much you've covered that with your conspiracy show. That's a good one. And that was intelligence agencies that want us to stay in war in Syria. They are staging staging these chemical weapons attacks and causing real casualties, but they're staged attacks, and trying to use that as the pretext to keep us in the war. So we were in a situation where Assad was winning. He was backed by the Russians, like when Trump first got elected. He was kind of in the clear as far as like he was about to win. The rebels were on their heels, like, and kind of mostly being driven out. The United States had just voted to, like, we want to get out of this situation. So the only thing that Assad could have done, or supposedly have done, to change that dynamic, to re-engage the United States into coming back and doing something about it, would be to use chemical weapons on your own people, right? And so it was one of those preposterous stories. It's like, why would this guy who's winning, who's just eked out this brutal civil war with the help of the Russians, why would he, when he has plenty of real, like, regular bombs, plenty of barrel bombs, and plenty of other things to kill people with, why would he go then use chemical weapons and, you know, stir the pot in a way that do the only thing that would get the United States to re-engage? And the answer is he wouldn't. Right? So at the time, it was very suspicious. But they had the OPCW, the Organization for the Prevention of Chemical Weapons, which is like a UN thing. They sent a team of investigators into Syria. And they, like, in the media, after that happened, the main report came out and said, oh, yeah, Assad totally did it. You know, this and that. Like, everything's checks out. That is what happened. And it came out, you know, I want to say a year ago, maybe. I could be mixing the dates up. Don't call me exactly on that. But an engineering report got leaked from the engineering people that were actually on the team in the ground in Syria that day, or with those guys. And it pretty much said that the report that they put out on our behalf was totally fraudulent. And those chemical weapons attacks could not, like, it is mathematically impossible with where those bombs were, with how the holes in the buildings looked, and just all the situations. It's mathematically impossible for that to have worked how they said it worked. So they're definitely lying. And not only are they lying, they are suppressing our engineering report to change the truth however they want it to be. Right. So it's a good example of the president wants to get out. The people want to get out. The intelligence agencies play these sadistic power games and stage whatever number of deaths needed to get their way.
And I'm assuming that this is not the first time that they've done this. I mean, I got to tell you, honestly, one of the first things that woke me up to this bigger geopolitical conspiracy is what happened on 9/11, where there were so many questionable elements to that you know, for years and years up to this date, people are still trying to figure out what the hell happened. It all started for a lot of people in the generation before me with JFK. And I know you've been pushing for the American people to call in and try to get the rest of those declassified, or these documents declassified, so people can actually find out what really went on. Did you have any little bits about JFK and 9/11 as other examples of the intelligence agencies operating against the American people? Yep. And yeah, okay.
So that's one of the JFK thing and the 9/11 thing are actually the same problem that we're facing there, the same underlying problem as of right here and right now. And that is D6. So D6 is this covert paramilitary wing of the CIA, but it's also, and this is the tricky part about it, it's also the highest level of classification in the DoD. And so D6 is like super, super duper classified, and it's essentially reserved for the stuff that would ruin our relationships with our allies. So if, like, since World War II, we've viewed the United Kingdom as our primary ally. And so, for example, if they made some mistake and it actually caused some Americans to die, they could just use that D6 classification to make sure nobody ever knew, and that it gets covered up forever, because their justification is that, oh, if that got out, that person's death is not worth ruining this longstanding relationship with our ally. This relationship with our ally is much more important than this person's death. And so we need to classify that to make sure that it doesn't mess up our relationship. And so this concept, which started right after, like, around the time of World War II, has gotten absolutely out of control over the years. And it now extends all the way to people that are not even our allies in the traditional sense of the word, people like Saudi Arabia. right? So Saudi Arabia is a regional ally, quote unquote, but Saudi Arabia does a lot of treacherous things against us all the time, and they do a lot of treacherous things all over the world. So it's pretty crazy that we are still using this D6 classification to cover up their involvement in the 9/11 situation, right? The fact that the royal family is who's behind that. And that's why they won't let us see those documents. And it's the same thing with JFK. They won't let us see those JFK, the part of the JFK documents that have not been declassified. They're still using this D6 thing to keep those under wraps, and that's pretty ridiculous as well. So in both cases, it's the bureaucrats in Washington abusing this classification to block and tackle for our treacherous allies, quote unquote.
Wow. Okay, so I guess this is a good time to ask about when you were mentioning there, the real culprits. I mean, you had something called the Eye, which was basically a trifecta of the Saudis, George Soros, and the Rothschilds, and how that links into Queen Elizabeth, the royal death cult, and the House Vetten family. What would you say about that?
So the Eye is essentially a mechanism for the royals who rule the world to outsource their gangbanging to some robber barons. And obviously the Saudi royal family is a part of that. They're technically royals too, but they're more robber barons than they are royals, in my opinion, because they were essentially installed by the British government, right? Arabia was just Arabia until the British government installed the Saudis, and then it became Saudi Arabia, right? And they've been used to perpetuate this gangsterism all across the globe ever since that happened. And so the idea is, and it goes back to the colony days, right? If you're going to send, some spies and you're going to try to go take over a country or build a country, you have to have, because there's oceans in between Europe and the United States. It's a long trip. So you got to send somebody over there with a vast amount of money and a vast amount of ruthlessness that can be, conducting your power games, but doing it in an independent way, right? Because there wasn't the internet, there wasn't, flights that you could get placed in a day. So intelligence operations, especially in the Americas, but all over the place, were organized around these business magnates that I call robber barons, essentially facilitators of intelligence agency gangsterism and activities. So the Eye is the funding mechanism of the covert paramilitary wing of the CIA and MI6.
Who work with the royals. They work for the royals, right?
Yep, exactly. So if they want there to be riots in the United States, then they send their guy George Soros to go around and fund the riot. If they want there to be tow missiles in Syria, then they send their Saudi friends over there to go arm those terrorists. And it happens the same way all over the world. When they want to, when they realize how much currency is a function of power, then they send their friends, the Rothschilds, to go take over the world banking system, right? And this is where a lot of people get confused, is they see the Rothschilds and they think, oh, they're doing some crazy stuff, and they are, and that this is a Jewish conspiracy at its heart, right? So
there's
the Jews take a lot of heat.
Right.
And the Rothschilds are Jews. They do use other rich Jews to facilitate their MI6 gangbang. But at its heart, fundamentally, it's not a Jewish conspiracy. It's a British conspiracy, right? A British Empire conspiracy. So,
and isn't that term? I know you talk about the Masonic tie-ins as well. Isn't the term? I was just covering this with another researcher on my show recently. Isn't the term Jew in Masonry denoting actually a rank, not so much as somebody that's a religious Jew or has to do with the Jewish race of people? Do you know anything about that?
I have not heard that as far as the Mason ranks go. The Mason ranks that I am aware of are things like Grand Wizard and things of that nature. So I'm not saying that's not true. I'm just saying I have not personally heard that.
Okay. Well, either way, you're just validating what I was literally just talking about this, because every time we talk about conspiracy, people want to blame it on this one group, and it just typically seems to be a group of people that people, hey, they go, oh, it's the Catholics. No, it's the Protestants. No, it's the Jews. No, it's it's Islam. It's these kinds of things. But what we're looking at here, and what I've from my own research been looking at, is that there are a lot of these organizations and institutions and even religious powers. They all shake hands behind the scenes. If there is a big global gang banging death racket, as you call it, going on in the world, there are all kinds of people from different backgrounds that would be involved with it, or at least, it's all compartmentalized, right? So there's a structure of power. There's the people calling the shots. Maybe there's even the people above them that we don't know about. And then there's all the lower ranking people who are just maybe taking money, or they get their rocks off with the benefits from all the underground slave trafficking and all that stuff. But that's kind of, so you're basically just validating the fact that what's happened to America over the last, let's just say from JFK moving forward, but we could probably even go back to 1776 and Adam Weishaupt and all that. But, even just from JFK,
we could go back to all kinds of things. How like McKinley was killed by these anarchists, that there was other world leaders killed by those same anarchists a few years later. One of them was Franz Ferdinand, guy who got World War I kicked off.
Right.
So same sort of a person killed William McKinley in, I think it was 1905. Going back to the Civil War, the royals family of the British Empire, they did a nice little tour around the United States right before the Civil War broke out. Just great timing there. So we could go back all the way to the Pirates of the Caribbean days, right? Really? Where MI6 originates from. It was originally called Marine Intelligence Unit 666. And the idea was that Britain was way smaller than Spain at the time, who was dominating the colonizing of the Americas. And Britain would send these hired mercenaries to go attack and plunder their gold ships going back. Because it was a good way for them to get a piece of the action when they couldn't really fight Spain straight up, because Spain was way bigger and badder than that. So they got these terrorists and criminals, and they would essentially go hire them to go attack people and steal their stuff. And that's kind of where the pirate flag comes from, that skull and crossbones.
Does skull and bones evolve out of that ideology?
It was Marine Intelligence Unit 666. So that's one of the things. They pretend like it stands for military intelligence now, but originally it was Marine Intelligence, and that's where that came from. And that was just in the Americas, right? So this method, of clandestine power games, dates back thousands of years. And so it's just kind of whoever's been the smartest or the most ruthless dog on the block has kind of gone around various empires. So when the current crop took over, all the main royals in Europe are descended directly from this guy named Theodoric, who started this thing called House Wettin. And House Wettin was like the precursor to House Coburg and Saxe-Gotha. And that house is the royals that are the descendants of that house. That's what Queen Elizabeth in the UK is. That's what the royals who run Belgium, where the head of the EU is. The Netherlands, the king who runs the Netherlands, he's House Coburg and Saxe-Gotha guy. Liechtenstein. So they own all kinds of stuff, and their ancestors seized power back in the day by hijacking the vast networks of spies and assassins installed all over the world by the Roman and the Byzantine empires. And so when they did that, they were able to eventually, bring down Rome and bring down Byzantium with these kind of clandestine methods, because they were able to hijack those networks of spies and assassins. And before that, the Romans, or the Etruscans, I think they hijacked them from the Phoenicians. And before that, it just goes way back into history. But it's essentially this, gigantic, ruthless, monolithic conspiracy, kind of like in that JFK speech that he was given, that combines, political, diplomatic, scientific, religious, kind of every aspect of society. They try to control. And a big part of that control, in the modern age at least, is using honeypots and using other sorts of blackmail, right? So identifying people who are pedophiles, for example, and then engineering them into positions of power because, it's
Now you got
violence
dirt on
against
them.
children. Yeah,
Right.
violence against children is universally unacceptable in every culture, right? We don't agree on a lot of things, but I think everyone on earth thinks like every rational person in every culture knows that children are off limits,
Yes.
right? And it's even not even just a human thing, right? A lot of other mammal species, like children are like the young are not targets, right? That's an off limits thing. So having that kind of blackmail, like the most mortifyingly salacious blackmail imaginable, allows you to have a bunch of little puppets, and that's essentially what we have right now in the Vatican, in a lot of the heads of the religions, in a lot of the heads of big businesses, all throughout our government. And they pretend like that's a giant conspiracy, and that doesn't happen. But that's totally a thing, and it's just up to us to explain it. And I think this Jeffrey Epstein situation was a great opportunity for us because it really brought that out into the open and showed all these people at the highest levels are going to this island and doing these weird sex rituals with underage minors. And that was the way intelligence services could be controlling billionaires, right? Because billionaires aren't really that scared of politicians, right? If you're a ruthless billionaire, you can buy off the police, you could buy off the politicians, you could buy off whoever you need. So threats don't really scare you. The only way to really control you is to get something horrible, like you hooking up with children or something along those lines, and use that to keep you in line.
It's similar to when I read Anthony Sutton's work on the Skull and Bones Society, where he was talking about that organization out of Yale. Interesting, you're talking about the pirates flag and all of that, and how you had people like George Bush Jr. in there and Senior and Kerry and some others and God knows who else. There was even a movie about it. But he was talking about how they had this ritual where they had to admit some of their deepest, darkest sins. And maybe that could even be taken as, well, they already had the dirt on these people, and that they groom them and then put them into positions of power. And then, of course, you have the Rhodes, the round table of the Rhodes sort of scholarship or whatever, that, again, plucks people out of these top universities for their intellectual and IQ capacity, puts them strategically into certain places, but has compromising information on them so that, as you say, they can be controlled like a puppet.
Yep, and Skull and Bones is a notorious example of like where people know they do things like make their recruits and like tell their secrets, make them engage in embarrassing, very sexual, a lot of times homosexual things that they get pictures of and can hold as blackmail. The other thing Skull and Bones did that's documented, that it's one of those things that, when people call you conspiracy theorists, it's like, oh, look this up. Is that a thing? Do you know that they're in this club? Is that they would have to get a kitten, everyone in that group, like one of their things for like proving that you're a member, you're worthy to be a member of the club, is you'd get a kitten and you'd raise it for some nominal period of time, I don't know, a few months, and then they would make you kill it.
Really?
And that was one of the requirements to be in the club, right? So just making sure that you're as sociopathic as possible was a prerequisite for being in their little cult. And then other things that I think they have these, the robe rituals, right? They wear the druid outfits, right? And that's something that the intelligence services do. That's not just limited to the universities. Even it's such a common, well-known thing that it's even portrayed in things like House of Cards, right? A very mainstream show. They have scenes in there where they go out in the woods and they dress up in these druid hoods and they do these hooky spooky rituals. And that's such an open secret in Washington that they can literally put it in a television show. But if someone like me comes out and talks about it, then we're a conspiracy theorist.
Right. And funny enough, that show is starring Kevin Spacey, who has been highly questionable in some of this, hasn't he? Or are you allowed to name any names?
Yep. I mean, I think everybody knows that he's got his, I would say, taste for young boys. And it's like a lot of the other situations in Hollywood. If people are going to have that big of a platform, that big of a voice, the people in power need to make sure that they're not going to go off script. Right?
So it's not just intelligence. This goes into the entertainment industry as well.
Exactly. The intelligence agencies have hand curated our media for a long time. And the way they get away with it is like, so, and the way they get with a lot of stuff is that when the CIA wants to do something in the United States, they just outsource that job to a foreign intel service like MI6, because the agents here, they have diplomatic immunity. So they can go kill somebody, they can go rob somebody, do whatever, and we can't prosecute them because they have diplomatic immunity. And this is like a concept around the world, one that needs to be looked at again. And the idea of diplomatic immunity in the first place was that if we send people to a country like Saudi Arabia, if we send diplomats over there and they don't follow the exact, like they get caught smoking a cigarette or drinking alcohol or doing something that's against the law over there, that our people don't, get dragged into the public square and have their heads cut off for disobeying the laws of another country, right? So it was originally pitched as a good thing, right? And it's explained away now as like a necessary evil. But what it actually is it's a facilitator for spy agencies like MI6 in the United States to be working with the CIA to hand curate Hollywood and to hand curate the heads of the tech companies in Silicon Valley and to hand curate just all the important positions. And I can't say every celebrity, but many of the major celebrities are involved in some very deeply disturbing things.
Were many of them in fact raised in this system and probably abused themselves, which is what kind of corrupted them from the beginning and then allowed them to be puppets for life for the big Hollywood elite?
Yes, certainly some of them were, but not all of them were.
Okay.
And, it's one of those things, if you want to get into the club and they have nothing on you, then they do the things like the Bohemian Grove, right? Where they go out in the woods and they have that big owl, they wear all those druid robes, and they do satanic rituals, including but not limited to like child sacrifice rituals. And it sounds extreme when we say that, but the idea since back in the day has been, if you want people to actually like keep your secret, then you got to force them to do things that are so stigmatizing that if they ever told anybody about what's happening behind the scenes, that they would be like, their stigma would be exposed and they would be run out of town, right? So have them do things that are so horrible that they would never, ever, ever tell because they don't want to be isolated from their society, right? Not just not famous anymore, but like having everyone, because if you're a pedophile, that's pretty frowned upon. If you murder children, that's pretty frowned upon.
Yeah. No kidding.
So they do all this crazy stuff, and that is very real. And again, it's not every single celebrity. So that's where we get a little over our skis sometimes in the Q movement. Sometimes we go a little overboard in looking at superficial symbols as proof of guilt or pictures with bad people as proof of association.
Right, like there's even pictures of Trump with Epstein at an older party back in the day, and people now kind of go, oh, look, Trump's in on it. And then I even saw some anonymous post, and I mean, I don't know how infiltrated Anonymous has become. It seems to be completely infiltrated by KGB or something, but there was a post someone sent me from Anonymous saying, yeah, we've got all this dirt on Trump, and it's him with some very compromising things going on in the background. Like, So is this another product of counterintelligence and disinformation, or what would you say about that?
I would say Trump just rolled with a very elite crowd that, if you were at one of those parties, that there's a good chance that Jeffrey Epstein was, around those circles as well. Right. It's kind of that concept of the George Carlin skit where he's like, it's one big club and you ain't in it.
Love that one.
So it's not necessarily to say that Trump's guilty of all that stuff, but it's just if you're in that, if you're running with that crowd, then you're going to eventually be in pictures with those people.
Right.
Well, it's kind of like so one of my main videos called Black Ops 101: The Dark Truth About the CIA, and
which is great, by the way.
Well, thank you. It talks about exactly how this COVID operations wing of the CIA works and exactly how like the legal loopholes they use to facilitate that and who is in charge and how the McCain family, they've been bigwigs in the military for a long time, were essentially running point on the American piece of that, right, of using drug cartels and human trafficking to be funding COVID operations. And so I'm in a picture with him, right, in one of my things.
Hmm.
showing people that, just like, hey, this is something I've been a target of mine for a long time. And just that picture alone, a lot of people are like, oh, he's a shill, he's a CIA agent, he's whatever, because he's in one picture with John McCain.
Hmm.
Right. And so to those people, it's like, well, how do you think anyone would ever get close enough to John McCain to be able to spill his dirty laundry or credibly accuse him of high crimes, we'll say, if they've never even met the guy or never even been anywhere, within 20 miles of him. Right.
Right. It's like James Bond then.
Very, yeah. So it's very silly logic, but it's one of those things. We're hoping that with the Q boards, it's designed to be a think for yourself exercise, right? And up very early on, one of the posts in there that it would said disinformation is necessary, right? So what that means is not just that there's things that are going to be wrong, like because we messed it up. Disinformation is different from misinformation. The fact that disinformation is very specific, strategic, false information, not just an error or a mistake.
Right.
And it's set up front that some of these things that we're putting in here, those are disinformation, and those aren't actually going to come to fruition at the end of the day. Things like I would say trust sessions, right? Do people trust sessions? I mean, some of them do. Things like the idea that we're going back to a gold standard, right? As we're taking our first major steps out into space, and where there's potentially unlimited amounts of gold, like benchmarking our currency to a commodity that we could, in 20 years, go find on an unlimited basis out in the atmosphere or out in the asteroid belt.
Hmm.
So things like that, right? You can't say exactly what the plan is up front, but for the most part, it's contextualizing the events happening in real time, and we're just hoping that everyone will, use their own discernment and actually go research the concepts and come to their own conclusions.
Well, and that's what I like about it, the whole, research thing for yourself. Are you good for maybe another 15 minutes, or am I taking too much of your time,
Absolutely.
Austin? Okay. I want to try to get through some questions here. Just finishing up on the Hollywood elite death cult, weird, satanic shit. What can you say about adrenochrome? This is a huge thing going on in the whole Q circle in the film Out of Shadows. People have been talking about this for a long time. Is this legit, or is this more planted disinformation?
No, that's 100% real, unfortunately. And
Shit.
the idea is that, and this is scientifically proven, you can probably find scientific papers on this now, and services where people are doing this, like for paid services, but consuming the blood of the young as an old person introduces antibodies and things into your system that prevents aging. So it wards off aging-related diseases. It keeps you younger, sharper. It essentially keeps your body from degrading over time. And the most potent blood is blood that's laced with adrenaline. So they have these, and this is a thing that a holdover from the Middle Ages, right? This is one of the aspects of most insidious aspects of the ruthless and monolithic conspiracy, is that they will go kidnap children and take them to dark tunnels or scary places, use masks, like Halloween masks and stuff, to not just kill those children, but to scare them as much as possible in the process. And so they can harvest adrenaline-laced blood, and they can keep themselves alive for longer. And it really does work. It's a concept that's gone back for a long time. So Queen Elizabeth is a descendant, or is a relative, of Vlad the Impaler. And Vlad the Impaler was the original guy who all those Dracula stories were originally about.
Right.
And so Dracula, the lore, the legend of the Dracula, is it's not a real thing, but it's an allegory to a real thing, right? It's describing something that's real, and so it's kind of a metaphor for it, in the sense of we have these very old people, right, that are coming and drinking blood, and they live way longer than they're supposed to, but if they ever saw themselves in the mirror, they would just die. Right. So the metaphor,
like Rapunzel,
there is that,
the story of Rapunzel with she has the hair, and when she sings, it lights up and keeps her illegitimate stepmother alive or something like that. It's kind of a metaphor as well.
Yeah. So there's a lot of that kind of stuff even in our children's stories that are not they're not actually true, but they're adjacent to things that are true, adjacent to things that are very troubling. And this adrenochrome industry is something that operates on a much wider scale than we could possibly imagine. And of course, to keep yourself alive for longer, like, it takes a lot of victims to add a few years onto your life, right? So the stuff is extremely expensive. But it's the reason that people like Queen Elizabeth, there was a video of her a couple of months ago. She's just like driving around in her car on her own. She's very lucid. When she makes public appearances, like for politics, she would always pretend like she's this frail old grandma, but she's extremely lucid. And the reason is she's been having this adrenochrome keeping her sharp. And so it's pretty evil stuff. There's people in Hollywood that take that. There's people in the heads of the business community that take that. There's politicians in the United States that take that. But consuming the blood of the young as a aging prevention technique is a real thing that's been around since forever, or since for thousands of years, right? And a lot of the like the Moloch rituals, right, the god of child sacrifice, the way that came to be in the first place was essentially not about sacrificing the child. It was about giving whoever the priest was the opportunity to drink the blood so that he could live longer, right? So it was like him tricking everyone into like giving up their children because some higher entity said so, and using that for prolonging your life. So it's pretty sadistic, pretty crazy. There's hundreds of thousands of kids a year that get gobbled up by the system, and it's one of the reasons why we just kind of gotta get out there and talk to people who disagree with us and stand our ground and just slowly explain it to them until they get it. Because it does sound like something out of a movie. It does sound like some batshit crazy theory, but it's 100% true, and it's 100% disturbing. So, it's really wild stuff.
Well, I can just validate what you're saying from a few angles. Number one, I've researched these types of, blood rituals and sacrifice rituals going back into history. So I can validate it from that perspective that, absolutely that makes sense. And a lot of people think, yeah, but all that stuff went away. We had an industrial revolution. We had the Enlightenment period. Now we have Western civilization and all these amazing things. And we have Macs and internet and Google Chrome and all this. So, there's no way that all those old ancient religious rites and rituals and satanic rituals and all that, there's no way that's still active in the world. And so I recently produced a series called Cults of Death and Power. It was even featured in a show on a History Channel called The Unexplained, where they were just doing little bits of it. And I went and did a whole research project on it and just went back into the cults, like the Heaven's Gate cult, Jim Jones, David Koresh, the Process Church of the Final Judgment, Manson, all that kind of stuff. When I was reading about some of those cults, there were a lot of journalists at the time that were documenting the fact that a lot of these cult leaders were actually funded and set up by intelligence agencies. Did you have any corroboration on that?
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of these cults are, I call them nightmare circus experiments.
They're experiments, yeah, exactly.
So just that work on how can we influence people into doing exactly what we say, even if it's totally irrational.
Right.
So there's all kinds of that stuff spread throughout the world. But yeah, that's a very real thing. And it's lots more people using that than we could possibly imagine.
Incredible. Okay. Let me try to get through a few more questions before I got to let you go here. So number one, we did Hollywood. I mean, there's probably scores of podcasts we could do on that, but let's just leave it there for people to research. Oh, opium, heroin, and the poppy. This is a huge part of this whole Pirates of the Caribbean / Royal Death cult, isn't it?
It is. So the idea was that, especially, it started way back in the day. So those pirate colonies that the British Empire was funding, they, didn't always have Spanish treasure ships to attack, right? Because there wasn't like an everyday sort of a deal. So they needed ways to sustain themselves in the meantime, right? So if you think about your pirate colony, right, you're out in the middle of nowhere. You're months away from any civilization, and there's not, right, the people that are around aren't like a bunch of business people are going to come buy houses or buy products, or that they're pirates, right? That are living very for the moment. And so the best way to like sustain themselves, the way they would be able to fund that and keep themselves afloat, would be using heroin and human trafficking, right? And heroin especially is a very reliable product to sell because people get so addicted to it. And so a lot of these pirate colonies, they were, not just attack other ships and loot their gold colonies, but they were human trafficking colonies and opium colonies, right? Because if you have a bunch of pirates that they just took a bunch of gold, right, their cut of it, what are they going to spend it on once they get back? And so that was their way they would keep those operations going when there wasn't Spanish ships to attack, and fund their covert operations for faraway places. So fast forward into the more here and now, places like Vietnam, right? The Golden Triangle. We go to war in Vietnam, and part of the reason of that was we needed places to cultivate heroin. And so there's all kinds of stories of this, what the soldiers experienced there, of how so many of them got addicted to heroin, and how there was all these trafficking operations moving heroin back to the United States. A lot of that is facilitated by intelligence agencies. Afghanistan is the same thing.
Yeah,
so in Afghanistan, there is 3 times as much heroin being cultivated there now as there was when we invaded in 2001. And it's one of the things I think that really gives a lot of our soldiers PTSD, right? Is because they're going over there thinking, I'm going to risk my life. I'm going to protect, my family. I'm going to defend freedom. And they get over there and they realize they're essentially running security. The Marines are essentially running security for a bunch of heroin cultivation operations, right? Jesus. So they're putting their lives at risk, not to free the people out of Afghanistan. The people of Afghanistan aren't really much more free than they were before. The Taliban when President Trump got in there, controlled much more territory than they did even when we invaded. And so they realized, hey, look, I'm not coming over here to free these people. I'm not coming over here to defend my people. I'm coming over here to do this drug dealing. Yes. And then they get home and they see this opioid epidemic tearing across the United States, killing tons of thousands of people, tearing us apart. And that's one of the big psychological traumas with a lot of our soldiers today, like the framework for a lot of the psychological trauma with soldiers returning from war today.
And I can validate that because in my martial art practice, I've actually had the opportunity to work with many soldiers that have PTSD. Some of them were in incredibly brutal situations. Some of them, they don't even want to talk about what they saw or what they know. But I've tried to use jujitsu and human contact and, motivational things and all kinds of other things, health things to help rehabilitate these fallen soldiers. And some of the things that they talk about, I can't even repeat on the air. It's just so incredible. So there's now millions of these soldiers coming back to Western countries that many of them were part of protests to try to stop the war efforts, because they were saying exactly that. They're like, we're just guarding drugs over there. We're just security for these illegal invasions and other people. We thought we were fighting for a country, but we were betrayed. There's a huge contingent of these people. Many of them are now homeless. And in this country, our Prime Minister, Justin Peoplekind Trudeau, who may be a result of an affair with Castro, who knows, maybe you can drop something on that. But he hasn't been doing anything for these homeless people. He's more concerned, as many governments are, with these other projects that I'm sure they're supposed to support because they all fall under the Royal Crown.
Yep. And it's one of those problems that's really been building up, and kind of so one of the things a lot of, I think, the dissident lefties these days, the reason they're dissident lefties instead of traditional lefties, the reason they're revolting against the Democratic Party is because they realize that the Democratic Party isn't anything like what they claim to be. And especially things like war, right? So Obama got in there, he had 2 wars, and he expanded those to 7. He authorized, the CIA to kill even American citizens if they're deemed terrorists. He ramped up drone strikes and all this crazy stuff. And if you notice, as our involvement in foreign conflicts picked up, our heroin problem in the United States, our opioid addiction problem, went up right along with it, right? Until where it's we're doing all these conflicts in all these countries, and now there's all this heroin all over the place, and all this human trafficking all over the place, and it's because they're using the intelligence agencies COVID operations wings are using those proceeds to be funding COVID operations in those various countries, right? So the more stuff we get into, the more money they need, the more drugs they push, the more children they kidnap. And it's just a vicious cycle. And so we're trying to help people see the correlation between our foreign conflicts and our domestic heroin problem, because it's very clear to anybody who looks.
Right. And one thing I've been looking at as well, I was going to ask you about, is the dark history. I call it the cult of the medics. And I'm tracing the lineage back, going through the Knights Hospitallers to the Knights of Malta, et cetera, coming through to the founding of the Rockefeller Institute, and then the growth of a lot of what we now call big pharma, or the pharmaceutical industry, which derives a lot of its medicines from opium and other interesting things. And now I think this is very relevant to our current situation, because we're essentially being held in house arrest right now with the threat of this whole pandemic virus outbreak. We call it the China virus, where now the only solution is to wait at home or wait in these very inhumane conditions until Bill Gates can release a vaccine that's going to save the world. So do you have any connections there with the big pharmaceutical industries? Because I've noticed a lot of Q posts talking about this, the Gates Foundation, the Rockefeller Foundation, et cetera.
Yeah, I mean, I won't get too much into the weeds, but I will say that very early on, we had both the president and the world's smartest man, Elon Musk, show us that hydrochloroquine, or hydroxychloroquine stuff, was a very effective treatment against coronavirus. And that wouldn't cause the appropriate level of panic, so it was immediately demonized. There was, psyops done where people are eating, fish tank food and dying. And, pretending that's not a legitimate treatment so that people don't go get that, when that, was a very effective treatment. A lot of the world leaders now are taking it. So it just shows how effective methods in medicine are intentionally suppressed in favor of maximum damage and also maximum profits by the people who are ultimately pulling the strings there. So it was one of those weird things to me. I was like, wow, I get, Trump said it, so they don't like that. But Elon Musk, they usually like Elon Musk. I guess until he says something that that helps Trump. Then whoops, well, I have no idea what that guy said. Didn't hear that. Right. Put that away. So it's just very interesting how we've had, a very effective treatment available all along, and the media and a lot of the ruling class is intentionally looking the other way and succumbing to the hysteria, trying to fan it as much as possible, trying to make it as visible as possible. Obviously for me, you probably have heard about my FBI situation. So I'm kind of stuck at home also, with or without the quarantine. And it was a pretty wild situation. I'm going to take a second to explain for people who don't know.
Sure.
But I get a lot of people naysaying about this. But essentially, when I came out, I was making these videos and kind of discussing how the government really works, how corrupt the CIA, how corrupt the FBI are, how these COVID operations function, how the FBI is blocking and tackling for it, especially in the Phoenix field office here, I live in Arizona. And I also had this thing called the Amorphous Archive. And what it was a bunch of curated CIA documents that were leaked and just showing very scary malfeasance on the part of our law enforcement intelligence communities and political class. And the company that was hosting it was on a file sharing service similar to like a Google Drive. It was like a beefed up business version of a Google Drive that you could put your own logo on, and you could have encrypted stuff with passwords and tracking cookies and all this stuff. But essentially it was like a Google Drive thing through a company called Datto. And so Datto got a call as I was doing this, from the CIA. And they essentially said, take this down. And we're threatening them, right? And so Datto took that down. They, like after the fact, about a week later, they pretended that I had violated some copyright thing, even though that's not what they said up front, and I didn't violate any copyright things. So I was paying for the service. They take my stuff down, and I demand it back with their support people. They don't give it to me. So I go on my YouTube video, and I say, hey, everyone, let's call and email Datto and help me demand these files back, right? This data hosted a service that I was paying for that I didn't violate the terms. And so I had, thousands of people respond to that and be sending emails to the data support email and, helping me demand those back and calling their tech support line. And kind of like, there's so many people doing that, I was jamming it up. And so a few days later, I, in the morning, got up to, there was an FBI SWAT team raiding my house.
Really?
So,
holy shit.
it was a good little pretext for them, the gangsterific FBI, to be as heavy-handed as possible. So they raided my house, literally like 20 like fully armed, like, body armor, helmets, everything, SWAT team. They tore my entire house apart, like turned everything over, opened all the drawers, pulled everything out, turned over furniture, did all kinds of stuff, broke stuff, scared the living daylights out of my wife. And they took all of my computers, servers. I ran an IT company. And it's my day job. And, so they took pretty much everything, including my phones. They took all of my guns. They took all kinds of stuff, and they charged me they said it was computer fraud facilitating extortion. So by their legal theory, they're saying that because my followers were sending them emails and they're not real customers of data, they're sending emails to the support line, that those are fraudulently conceived emails that I'm using to extort data. So they're saying that my, few thousand followers doing that is extorting this, multi-billion-dollar IT corporation, one of the biggest companies in IT. They're saying that was extortion. So it's pretty ridiculous, and it's really just an attempt to shut me up. They threw me in jail for a few days, didn't feed me for a few days, and did all this crazy stuff. And then the crazy part is that would happen on March 30th, I want to say. And so I've now spent 2 stints in jail over this situation of them trying to snipe me and throw me in there for ridiculous reasons that my lawyer have to get me out. And I have not even been arraigned yet. So normally, like when you get arrested, like the next day is the arraignment, right, where they formally bring the charges against you.
Right. Yeah.
And in this case, they are treating me like it's this baby extortion charge, right? Where even if it was true, which it isn't, because I was paying for the service, that it wouldn't be that, like I'm some kind of like terrorist or violent criminal, but they are treating me like I'm an extreme flight risk and extreme danger. So they banned me from the internet. They banned me from possessing any device that even connects to the internet. They put me on one of these ankle trackers, even though I have not even been charged with a crime yet, let alone convicted, not even charged. I have to wear these ankle bracelets. I'm on house arrest. And so, yeah, it's all this crazy stuff. They said I can't drink alcohol, even though it's like, I never had a problem with alcohol. Alcohol is an unrelated factor to this situation. So just all kinds of extra crazy arbitrary rules. And it's essentially just a giant shakedown to shut me up.
Right. They're just trying to find something.
And they didn't expect me to get on the phone like this on my nice little flip phone here and be doing interviews, just the same as I would before. So they're upset about that. But yeah, so the Q movement and a lot of the main influencers that are offended by the idea that this is my operation, they have gotten themselves in a position where they are cheering on the FBI's gangsterific shakedown of my house, which they did. Like they sent SWAT teams to my house because I told my followers to call and email a massive corporation, right? Which is essentially, in my mind, activism 101. If you go look at MoveOn.org, if you go look at PETA, go look at really almost any movement, that's like kind of their thing is you tell people to call and email the people that you're having a disagreement with. And
where's the FBI to go save the day in America when people are burning down people's businesses and throwing bricks at people and killing people in the streets? They're not going after them. They're worried about hackers like you, obviously.
Yep. And the FBI, actually, I have a good source on this. They have been, for years and years, actively standing down local law enforcement against Antifa.
Really?
They've also been, had undercovers in the crowd, stirring the pot. So the FBI is not just being incompetent with Antifa, they're being actively malicious with Antifa. Wow. And just one of the ways they roll, right? They these crazy conspiracies that happen in the United States could not happen without the FBI actively blocking and tackling for it. And so the people that don't like me have gotten themselves in a situation where they're defending this FBI, right? They understand that, okay, somebody else from GIA, Michael Flynn, got railroaded by the FBI, and they totally understand, oh yeah, that was crazy, we got to defend him. But when it comes to me, they're like, oh, go FBI, right? Let's cheer on the idea of, because someone's followers are calling and emailing a company, let's cheer on the idea of that now setting the pretext, the legal groundwork for the FBI to come raid your house. If that precedent stands, nobody's safe, right? Everyone that talks publicly has people that, may or may not act on or get angry about the things that they're saying. And that sets a precedent that could gravely endanger us all. And it's unfortunate to see a lot of the people who are supposed to be on our side cheering that on. Hopefully they will re-examine, reassess, and come back down to earth with us and realize that this is bad news. The other thing, hopefully they'll realize that it gives us a great opportunity now to where we subpoenaed the amorphous archive, and that's going to be going into the public court record. So all these salacious clips, these CIA documents, those are now going to be litigated in the public record. The other thing is we're going to be litigating the idea of whether or not asking your followers to call and email an entity is extortion, right? So it's not. And I think once I have my day in court, my lawyer and I are both very confident that, we have a contract, which is such exonerating evidence showing we're paying for this service. They took it down for a reason that wasn't violating their terms of service. So it can't be extortion. But the FBI is holding all my computers, so we can't get that exonerating evidence until we go to trial. And we don't know when we're going to go to trial because they're supposed to arraign you the day after that you get arrested. But the courts gave, in my case, green light to be not arraigning me. Like the latest date they have now, I think is 90 days. So until July 29th, they have to arraign me. So they violated my right to free speech. They violated my Second Amendment rights by disarming me without me being convicted of a crime and without me being accused of a violent situation. And they disregarded my Fourth Amendment rights, right, with unwarranted searches and seizures.
You're not allowed to have you can't have a Heineken. They took away your right to drink Heineken.
Exactly. So all these things, and then they were trying to even take away my right to speak too, because they already took the internet, which is a pretty extraordinary step, especially for somebody who's not even been convicted yet. And they, in court, last time we were in court, they tried to challenge. They tried to say, oh, this guy, he's saying some wild stuff, so he's mentally incompetent. And the reason they said that was because they wanted to get this flip phone taken away. They're like, he's too dangerous. He needs to have that flip phone taken away. And luckily, the outrageous judges out here who have been rubber stamping all their other gangsterism didn't quite go for that one. So she's like, I don't know about that. That seems pretty sketchy, guys. But that's where we were at. Is they were trying to categorically shut me up in every way, with force, with SWAT teams, right? And I have no official criminal history, I have no criminal record. I am not a flight risk, right? I'm not a terrorist. So how I've been treated is absolutely outrageous, absolutely beyond the pale, and should be scary to anyone who values their liberty in any way, shape, form, or fashion.
Well, liberty's under threat in all ways possible. Speaking of being disarmed, the entire country of Canada has just essentially been disarmed, where thousands and thousands of guns have been taken off the legal registry now. Many of my friends are now just looked at as criminals. Right. And funny enough, Trudeau did that during a time where Parliament was shut down due to the virus. So there was no democratic process where the other side could present any kind of debate. There was no debate. He made up a rule, and then it basically just initiated this is effective immediately. And they did it off the back of this major shooting that has a lot of sketchy details to it in Nova Scotia, where some guy went crazy. He got his guns illegally, went around, started shooting people, which is horrific and crazy, but he was mentally deranged. He got his weapons illegally. There's all kinds of other factors. And now Trudeau's response to that was, let's just take everybody's rights away. And given the other steps that the Canadian government has been taking, moving more and more and more towards a socialist totalitarian state, that's quite alarming, especially during the situation we find ourselves in. So I'm with you, man. There's this is
Yep.
happening all over the world right now.
And we always got to keep in mind that Trudeau Bird, that's what my nickname for him, is just a little
Nice.
puppet, right?
Yes.
He's not actually ultimately calling the shots on anything.
No.
The commander-in-chief of Canada, aka Queen Elizabeth, is who's been calling the shots on things, right?
Okay.
So the people who control,
Makes sense.
they like to play this game, the royals, especially the Anglosphere royals. They pretend like, oh, these prime ministers are in control, you have control of your own military. And the truth is that queen controls the Canadian military, Canadian spies. She controls the Australian spies. She controls the New Zealand spies and military. Even places like Belize and Jamaica. Belize and Jamaica they have these fake democracies where Queen Elizabeth, if you Google it, is the head of state of Belize and Jamaica.
Right. Yeah.
To this day.
I did see that. That's incredible.
So it's a pretty wild situation, and the way she's been able to keep such tight control is they have this really advanced signals intelligence gathering capabilities, right? So since forever, they've been monitoring all the wires. So every phone call, even after the war in the 50s, every phone call is monitored. And now every email, every text message, all that stuff. It gets sucked up into the signals intelligence service. And a lot of people don't realize we have this thing called Five Eyes. So Five Eyes is an agreement between the United States, New Zealand, Australia, the UK, and the Western countries where we share intelligence services, or we share signals intelligence, right? So we have unrestrained access to each other's signals intelligence. So for a long time, like is one of those things when the CIA, they have somebody that needs to get killed in the United States, you have the British spies who can just monitor every single American call, telephone, email, everything, and location data. They have them just go hunt them down and get them. And then they have that diplomatic immunity there, and vice versa. So if the people in the UK need somebody gone, they have the CIA just go use signals intelligence, right? They don't need a warrant because they're coming from the foreign angle, and they use that to tee off on us. And this was especially underscored, this situation we're talking about here, when they were trying to set Trump up for this Russiagate thing. Who did they send to go meet with George Papadopoulos, right? Was it Australian spies, right?
Yeah.
And then when one of the things in the Q board, there's a lot of mentions to how Peter Strzok and Lisa Page were flying to London a lot. So the FBI, since forever, has been using they do not just law enforcement, they do counterintelligence. So counterintelligence is like hunting spies and playing those games in the United States. And the way the FBI has run that in the past is by using the British signals intelligence to quote unquote hunt down spies in the United States. Obviously they abuse the crap out of it and they use it to harass civil rights leaders like Martin Luther King and whatnot. But the FBI counterintelligence operations are facilitated through this foreign country, who's theoretically our ally, but stabs us in the back all the time. And that's why Peter Strzok, one of the top counterintelligence officials in the FBI, when he's trying to go frame Donald Trump, he goes and flies to London and taps in and can look at all of the phone calls, emails, and everything with no warrant and with no justification.
That's incredible. Like when this kind of stuff starts to hit the critical mass, because like we could verify that this is the thing is, if people think that it's crazy that we're talking to a guy that is saying that, there's this whole thing with Q and there's quantum computers and futuristic postings and, big Illuminati death cults and all this stuff. If you think it's crazy, the craziest thing about it is you can actually go validate it through research. I've been working on validating this for 18 years myself. And I've got people that I've spoken to who all have their different takes on it, but everybody kind of looks at the same thing. For even 30 to 40 years. So you can verify this. And so even if people don't believe the narrative, go look at the research, go look at the information. If you don't believe Austin is Q, then put that aside and actually go look at the information. And that's why I was attracted to your videos and I actually couldn't get enough of them. And what you're saying here is just blowing me away, just because I'm learning new things. You're putting a lot of puzzle pieces together for me personally, and I've also independently verified a lot of this stuff. So I just wanted to say that, and then also finish off with two final questions that you can roll through real quick, because I know I'm stepping over on the time here, and we'll definitely have to have you back, Austin. But let's go with, I've been getting a lot of these emails about this new King of England thing, and you were just talking about the royal family, the Queen of England. Do you know, is it too early to talk about it? Do you know anything about this alleged new King of England? And then the final question is, when do you think, or are you able to say anything about when we may be seeing some of these mass arrests that have been spoken about for so long in the Q movement?
Well, so addressing the first thing, a huge prerogative of this whole mission is to be taking out the root of all the evil, which is these royals, that if you're a royal, you have a lifetime tenure and you have sovereign immunity, right? So whatever criminal activity you do engage in, you can never be prosecuted for it. And they're just totally out of control, totally to the point of where they're, using American intelligence services to run coups against the United States president, right? So powerful beyond belief. And so Queen Elizabeth, just for example, she was seated in 1953, right? So she's been in there for a long time, and royals operate on these like 50-year time horizons, so they're able to stay way ahead of the politicians. And so a big prerogative of this whole thing has been taking them out. And if you do your research, you'll see that House Cobra of Saxe-Gotha is not even like a British or originating thing, right? So the Queen of England, the Queen of the United Kingdom, is not British. She's Germanic, right?
I've heard of this.
So the bloodline of kings, of actual British kings that were like British descended kings, got hijacked a long time ago. And so what this guy coming in now is saying is that I am the actual legitimate bloodline claim to this English throne, and here's the evidence, right? The bloodline. So that's what he's in the process of doing right now. And if you notice, another interesting aspect of that is in Buckingham Palace, which is like the Queen's White House, if you will. The Queen's family seal got taken off the front gate, and all the windows got boarded up. And she's kind of been nowhere to be found in the public eye for a while. So I can't say everything that's happening, but just lots of interesting developments on that front.
Is that related to Q, or is it something's happening?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
So like Q is a lot of things, right? So it could be referring to like the person, like me. It's most of the time referring to like the mission at large, which is like the operation. And so the operation is designed to get rid of these royals. And there's a lot of other power mechanisms that we could talk about in a later episode that they control, that they use to not just the signals intelligence, but lots of other fun stuff too. And so obviously we in the United States a lot of times, especially like on the right, I'm a lifelong Republican, and we look at people like Hillary Clinton as the root of all evil. Like, oh man, if we could just take down Hillary, then man, all our problems would be solved. And the truth of that is that wouldn't solve anything. There would be another Hillary here in 5 seconds.
Right.
Because Hillary's not the top of the chain there, right? So our presidents and our like top people are under this I thing, right, which is the funding mechanism, and that I thing is under the royals. So the royals are actually the root here of all the evil, and that's who we're ultimately targeting at the end of the day. Obviously, we're trying to like clean out all of the people downwind of them as well. But the reason that we've never really succeeded in dramatic reform before is because we've never actually got the root of the problem. And the root of the problem is not in the United States, as far as like our president or our top people, because they've been puppets for a long time. And anyone who steps out of line either gets killed, or like Ronald Reagan got shot. And then after he was shot, he kind of like his vice president ran a lot of the show from then on. So a lot of things. And if you notice, even like President Trump, when he got elected, he refused to be protected by the Secret Service until he was actually sworn in. He used his own private security because he did not trust them.
So he already knew. Was he briefed before? Obviously, like he was handpicked, wasn't he, by this whole operation, or was he part of it? Like,
Yeah, he's been cultivated and put forth by the covert wing of the Defense Intelligence Agency to help us solve this problem, right? And it was kind of just, we needed someone who was had unlimited resources, right? So he's got all the resources to protect himself. He's been in all kinds of like lawsuits, right? He's a big businessman. So like business in Lower Manhattan, right, is a bunch of billionaires doing this kind of like hiring ex-spies, doing all this kind of gangsterism to each other. So he's got a lot of experience duking it out, paying the right politicians, greasing the skids in the ways that he needs to make his goals happen. He's also got a lifetime of experience, and his whole family, of being accosted by like tabloids in the press, right? And he's had his ups and downs in the past, as far as like when he had those bankruptcies, of getting just relentlessly attacked in the media. So he was really a battle-hardened soldier that, like the kind of person we needed. I don't think anybody else could have really been pulling off what he's doing now, as far as staying in the game, as far as not succumbing, right? Bending but not breaking, right? In a lot of ways, he's had to compromise on the agenda, or he's gotten overruled on certain things. But he's in there to help us create the dramatic change that we need. And this, between him and this QAnon project, it's designed to help the United States move itself into the future. So we're at a point of where we're at the crossroads between we're coming out of the nuclear age and we're moving into the quantum age. And so it's a point in time similar to like the late 30s and like maybe up to 1940 in the United States.
Okay.
Where there's been lots of economic turmoil, lots of unrest, lots of political fighting back and forth. And after the war, so the country the United States was in 1940 and the country it was in 1950 were completely different, right? So we as a country unified around the war effort of World War II, and it kind of like got our spirits aimed in the same direction and our energy, and we started paddling in the same direction and started moving towards the common goal. And we advanced as a country more in that 10 years than we probably did in the next 40 years combined. Right. So it was just a completely different place, a time of extreme change. And obviously it was the World War situation that was our focal point to unite around. And there was a lot of things in there, like it engaged every single citizen in society, right? Every single person felt the war effort, the fact that the United States was going to war, and every single person was called to contribute, right? So they had things like national speed limits. They had things where you were only allowed to buy a certain amount of gas, which wasn't enough to really get anywhere unless you were an official that had to travel around. They had rubber drives, right, where they needed a bunch of rubber for tires and for all kinds of stuff. So they had everybody turn in tubes and old pieces of rubber and old tires so they could be melted down and remade. They had metal drives where they would have everyone be contributing, their old scrap metal to the war effort. They had, like in that time, they had linen rations and shortages and cloth rations and shortages. So that was the time when women's clothing, for example, like the shorts or skirts before the war would be well past the knee and very, very conservative by today's standards. And the shorts during the war, since there was those linen shortages, they were, above the knee, right? So it made women's clothing way smaller but it was something that the war effort was something that every single member of society really felt and really like got amped up about and helped participate in. And so that was one of the things that really helped channel our spirits to really make our economy boom and to bring about a lot of the major changes that we needed to be succeeding as a country in the next era. And so that's what we're trying to do right here with this QAnon movement. Obviously, we got a bunch of bad people trying to do bad things to us. And we're trying to help contextualize that, help explain what exactly is happening to the people, and helping to engage as many of the regular citizens as possible to help us participate in this effort so that we can be coming together as right and left, realizing that a lot of our problems, a lot of the things we bicker about, are things that were intentionally designed to make us bicker and help make us go nowhere, right? Just fight amongst each other and never have anything change. Just to help us unite and align our spirits towards a common goal. And when we can do that, we can really make a lot of progress quickly, and we can make the United States a totally different country in 2030 than it was in 2020. Right? 2020 is kind of a mess, but I think Trump can be, and Trump will be viewed as history as like a modern FDR, in the sense of he helped us channel our spirits and overcome these very grave threats to our security, and helped us unite and come together around a common goal. And we're not quite there yet, but that's one of the main missions of this QAnon thing too, is to help us build that camaraderie with the lefties, right? A lot of the themes in the QAnon are things like, these wars are a racket, the CIA is out of control, the FBI is teeing off on legitimate political causes and individuals in the United States. Our political class is totally corrupt, like criminally corrupt, and should be run out of town. So our corporations and big money is dominating a lot of things. So it's a lot of these themes that I think lefties could really vibe with if we could take the time to explain it to them, right? Things that they've been talking about for a long time, but maybe reflexively pull back at the moment because they view this Q thing as like a right-wing thing. But I think we could be really using this as a, it's going to be shocking everybody to their core, but I think we can really come together and move our country forward once we get the word out there. Right? It's what I said earlier of we're the first PSYOP in history where we spook you into doing what we want by just telling you the truth.
That's incredible. I mean, can you imagine, folks? Can you imagine if this is actually real? And I mean, everybody's gonna have to make up their own minds. I'm excited. I'm hoping. I'm following. And Austin, man, you've really dropped a lot here. Do you think that before the election, we're gonna start to see some more of this come to the surface, or we're gonna start to see some of these big arrests of these big names, or do you think we're gonna have to wait longer for that?
Well, it's really. So there's a couple things I'll say about that. One is the first thing I'll say is that like the mass arrests in the sense of like hundreds of thousands. So there's these lists of like there's 170 some odd thousand indictments, and I think a lot of people are thinking that those are all for political leaders or for big time people, right? There's just going to be like this mass purge, and we're going to wrap all these people up. And what they don't realize is that many of those indictments, the majority of those, are for people who are already in jail. And what I mean by that is, so what I said earlier, that one of the primary prerogatives of this mission in general was to lay the public opinion groundwork for big changes, one of which was breaking up the FBI, like exposing the FBI as a fundamentally corrupt organization and disbanding it. And if we did that, right, if we go back and we show how evil Robert Mueller was, about how evil James Comey was, about how evil J. Edgar Hoover was, then all these criminals that they've put in jail legitimately, like real serial killers, real terrorists, they would be able to go back and immediately challenge their cases and get out of jail until the government could retry them, right? They would all get new trials. So a big amount of these indictments, sealed indictments, the vast majority of them are for people who are already in jail, that when the FBI gets their legs taken out and when all those cases get reexamined, the government is already prepared to keep all the people who are actually, vicious monsters in prison where they belong, right? And to not have just this mass anarchy we're unleashing on ourselves by chopping legs out from the FBI. So that's the first thing. We will see, more information exposed, but before we could really drop the hat like we want to with some of these extremely bad actors, we have to continue getting the truth out there, because right now, like if we went after John Brennan, for example, right, or James Comey, people who did clearly engage in malfeasance, plain as day, tons of evidence, obvious to everyone who cares to look, people, like they would go to a court in Washington, D.C., and they would be tried by a judge who thinks that Russia attacked our democracy and that those guys are just trying to help us. And a lot of the jurors trying them would also feel the same way. So even if we had them dead to rights, have all this evidence, if the jury and the judge are still so hopped up on this BS propaganda about Russia, then we're not going to secure indictments of those guys, right? So it's really about
strategy. Takes time to do it.
Yep. So part of this is creeping closer, getting the word out there more and more, but creeping closer, sort of like surrounding them more and more and more, and getting people to defect and to flip on each other. Because if they flip on each other, it's a whole different ballgame than if we have to like try every single person individually. So part of this is to spook them, and part of the like insinuations on the board that things were about to be imminent were kind of like head fakes, if you will, into like spooking people into flipping on their coke, right? And so every time the little head fake happens, another round of people gets flipped on, and another batch of cases become secure for the convictions, right? Because we go to court and they get found not guilty, even if later on down the road, then people realize like, oh, those guys were evil. If they already got found not guilty, then they're off forever. So we want to make sure we're nailing their feet to the floor and we're giving them no way out. And the best way to do that at this point is to keep getting the word out there, keep making them more and more nervous and flipping on each other, and to engage with the left. We got to engage with the left. We don't, in the QAnon movement, we're not the best at that, and we got to get way better. Because once we do that, that's what's really going to blow the doors off this thing.
Yeah, we got to get rid of all this division that actually serving this great evil in the end.
Yep. We got to, unite as the people, right? Because we've been kind of put into these little silos that we're not supposed to be talking to each other, right? If you're on the left, you look at the right and you're like, oh, those guys are Nazis. And if you're a lot of people on the right and you hear a lot of the mainstream Republicans, you're like, oh, those people are all communists and socialists. And so we got to stop looking at each other as these evil categories, right? Because most people, that's not what they are. And see ourselves as like, look, this is the people versus the power, right? This is the commoners versus the royals, not the left versus the right.
Well said there. Well said there. I know I probably got to let you go, Austin, but there's a video floating around apparently with some really crazy stuff about Hillary Clinton. Is she going to be brought under? I just saw on Judicial Watch that they're actually going to start filing charges with her or something when it comes to some of the lower level stuff. But are you allowed to say anything about this alleged video where she's involved in some of this crazy adrenochrome stuff, or is that stuff we have to wait for?
I have not seen the video. I'm not sure what video you're talking about. I may have seen it, but so that's me. We can talk about that next time. I will say Hillary's orbit will be brought to justice. Right. And it was ironic today. So she was scheduled to testify today. And all of a sudden today, there's this movement of like, everybody that's a true lefty needs to not be on social media, post this black square and not be on social media. So it's just another example of how like well-meaning people, I would say, I believe that most of them are well-meaning in doing that.
Yeah.
But they don't realize you're just getting tricked into covering your eyes when bad things are going to come out. Right. Like, so it's just like unbelievable.
Wow. That's a
right. Oh, let's all not be on social media today. Let's all post this black square to shame everyone else who's being on social media to not be on social media, because we need to cover our eyes because the powerful white liberals who run us said so. And that's what's frustrating to me I think most frustrating to me about the Black Lives Matter movement is not necessarily anything they stand for. It's the fact that they are being manipulated by people who are actively hostile to their interests. Like the people that are ultimately pulling the strings around Black Lives Matter are people that are hostile to the interests and well-being of the Black people at large. So it's sad. And it's
they don't care about Black people. They don't care about. This is a battle against humanity. This isn't about black, white, man, woman, any of that. This is a battle against us all.
And it's one of those things. It's since the beginning of time, right? If you're of one family, like if you're a royal family, trying to physically maintain control of an entire country, right? They vastly outnumber you, no matter any way you want to slice it. So since the beginning of time, if you're royal and you want to actually have control of your country, the way you do that is by pitting all the various groups of people against each other, right? So that in our case, it's two parties, and in the past, it's been more than one party, or like multiple parties. But like in the United States, right? If it's 49.5% versus 49.5%, and we're just always pushing against each other at each other's throats, then the 1% is who ultimately decides everything, right? Because they're the tiebreaker. So it's a way to like be the minority, like a tiny minority, and to maintain control, like you run everything. And that's just kind of the power games 101, and it has been since the beginning of time. So we really got to try to look past that and see that this is all contrived, that we don't actually really hate each other that much, that most of us, almost all of us, are appalled by people like the, police killing someone in an egregious way like that. Mm-hmm. And almost all of us are appalled at the idea of looters just killing people and destroying small businesses, right? So it's this very contrived thing that unfortunately pushes us back into our corners a lot of the time. So hopefully we could be just out there discussing this and not let that happen this time, not let this push us back into our corners, have us keep engaging with the left, have us keep, finding areas we can work together. And I think one of the best areas is just like recognizing that our government is too corrupt to function, and that, the establishment's got to go. The Republican establishment has got to go. The Democrat establishment's got to go. And like even, a lot of the Republicans that are in there right now are actively hostile to Donald Trump's platform, his voters, and his reelection prospects. Like the lady who runs the Republican Party right now, name's Ronna McDaniel. She is Mitt Romney's niece, and they're doing all this silly stuff. One of which, I think the most egregious of which, is she brought in CrowdStrike. So CrowdStrike was the fraudulent racketeering IT company that Hillary's goons brought in to lie and say that Russia hacked our election, even though they didn't even necessarily say that. They kind of like pushed some innuendo. And we're like, oh, we believe they may have hacked the election. But so it was the goons that Hillary brought in to lie are who Ronna McDaniel turned straight around and hired to protect the Republican Party computers, all of them. So this company that was a part of a plot to frame our president for treason, to make it up out of thin air and frame him for treason, is now who has direct access and control over the cybersecurity of every Republican computer, of every Republican trying to get reelected. And so it's not just incompetence, it's direct malice. And people are like, oh, well, why would she do something like that? Like, she seems like a nice lady. Why would she be, why would the head of the Republican, the RNC, be actively hostile to the reelection prospects of Donald Trump? And the reason is because her uncle is Mitt Romney, right? And Mitt Romney had a very winnable election in 2012 that he lost because he refused to ever push back on the slander being leveled his way, right? He was one of those guys. He just wanted to sit back and be like, oh, my record speaks for itself, blah, blah, blah. I'm just going to do the wet noodle style of politics where I get pushed over and bullied into, the other people's way. And that failed badly, right? So Trump is kind of the antithesis to that style, right? Where he's, if you insult him, if you lie about, he's coming straight back at you on Twitter. He's not holding anything back. And, policy-wise, he, is more of a sovereignist than a globalist as far as things like trade deals, right? So Mitt Romney is like the neocon's neocon, and Donald Trump is the antithesis of that, right? He's like an actual conservative in my mind, representing the will of the people, right? He's more populist, I guess, is the word I was looking for there. And so that's the antithesis of Mitt Romney. And if Romney wants to be president, and if Trump gets reelected now, that essentially closes the door on Mitt Romney ever having an opportunity to be president, right? Here's this Trump style of politics as the way to go for the Republican Party for decades to come. Whereas if they can pretend, and they still do, lots of the Republicans to this day, including Marco Rubio, pretend that Russia hacked the election or meddled in the election in any kind of meaningful way. If they can keep pushing that, and then Trump can lose in a close election to an incredibly weak, like half-dead opponent like Joe Biden, then that sets Mitt Romney up perfectly in 4 years to beat Joe Biden and to become the president like he's always wanted to be, right? And for Ronna McDaniel's sake, for her career prospects, what's better for her, Donald Trump presidency or Mitt Romney presidency in 4 years? And that's an easy choice, right? If your family member is going to become so she's got herself and her own political ambitions and her family's political ambitions in mind, and not the interests of the Republican voters in mind when she's making the decisions that she is. And it's totally crazy. Tori Lindman from Red State Radio did a really great article on this a couple weeks back, but just showing how the Republicans, people running the Republican Party, not the Trump people, but the people actually running the Republican Party, are actively sabotaging Trump and the will of Trump's voters around every corner, intentionally. So that's one of the things we got to wake up to and put our foot down and not be accepting that anymore, right? We voted Trump in to do a specific job, and if they're going to get in his way, then we need to move them out of his way, and we need to be running them out of town and teaching them that you work for us, right? This isn't your fiefdom. You work for us. If we vote for something, like we want to get out of the war in Syria, we don't want ground troops there, then you're going to stop and you're going to listen to us. And you're not just going to wag your finger at us and pretend like we don't know, because we do know, right? We have all the WikiLeaks. We could see how corrupt your motives were from day one, right? There was never a legitimate humanitarian interest in Libya or in Syria, in Yemen, in any of those places. To the degree of where one of the emails in my amorphous archive, one of the clips I took from Hillary Clinton's email, was a clip that literally was from one of her intelligence operatives on the ground in Libya. That one of the direct quotes that is like one of the most epic direct quotes of any email I've ever put out there is, the humanitarian motive offered is limited, like for going to the war in Libya. Read the poll, win the war, no way out. So it's a whole email talking about, and there's more to it than that, but that is a direct quote, talking about how we're not even going over here to steal Libya's oil. We're doing this so Hillary Clinton can look tough for the poll numbers.
Wow.
We're destroying the most prosperous country in Africa, of Libya, where despite the fact that Gaddafi was on his hands and knees begging us to negotiate, saying he would do whatever we wanted, we still kill him anyways. We destroy this country. And it's been in I think it's just a 2-sided civil war now, but it was in a 3 or 4-sided civil war for a long time. And there's, open air slave markets. Like if you want to go buy like a human slave, like straight up, just go buy a human, you could do that in Libya now, right? That is what we turned Libya into. We set Libya back 50 to 100 years with our ridiculous intervention there that we pretended was, helping the people against the powerful, when really it was destroying the most prosperous country in Africa so that Hillary and Obama's poll numbers could look better, so they could seem tougher and they could do better in elections. Unbelievable, right?
That's incredible.
So that's the kind of reason why I got these FBI SWAT teams after me. They want to shut me up by any means necessary. But that's one of the things we're not going to shut up. We're going to keep moving forward, and we're going to get the word out there. And it's black and white, right? And especially because we have their emails now, right? So anybody wants to disagree with any point of this, we can literally put emails down in front of them. Look what this says. Look what this says. Look at how, ISIS was not a natural thing, right? ISIS was a intelligence agency project stood up by the CIA and MI6, armed with American weapons, and they were not legitimate in any way, right? There's not a natural movement at all. And it's actually, speaking of ISIS, speaking of the situation in Syria, a good parallel to like how they set the stage for wars in other countries is kind of what's happening in our country now, right? So they'll go get a bunch of, they'll have things of where there's people protesting for legitimate causes, and then they'll have spy agencies go stack a bunch of like gangsters and vandals in there to go tear stuff up, destroy things, light things on fire, kill people. And then the military of whatever country that we're targeting, in the case I'm talking about was Syria, right? The military gets rolled in, and obviously if you're in a place like Syria or anywhere else in the Middle East, if you're, lighting stuff on fire, if you're shooting at people, if you're doing crazy stuff, they're going to deal with you in a pretty heavy-handed way, right? So then the military steps in, they start cracking skulls, the protesters get more amped, and the military, will cross a line, and usually they'll have clips like what, the few bad apple cops or that are doing with the protests now, where they're being like really aggressive in certain cases, where they're attacking people, without cause. But the cops are attacking the protesters that aren't being violent in some cases. And we'll take snippets like that, and we'll blow that up, and we'll allow the rebels to use that to turn around as they're raising hell in that country and call for support from the United States of America. And once they do that, then a lot of times our military will get air support. They will get, the help, quote unquote, that they need. So it's all just a giant game. And if we were a less powerful country, that would be happening to us right now, right? If we weren't the baddest dog on the block, our foreign enemies would be using this situation with Antifa to create that situation here. And then they would allow the most violent elements of Antifa to turn around and call for help. It would be like, if Antifa called for help from the Chinese, and the Chinese came and started bombing us because Antifa says that the police and the military are being too mean to them. Right. That's kind of the equivalent of the situation that was in Libya, it was in Syria, it was in Yemen. Right. So that's how we create the pretext to be turning these countries into rubble. But yes,
Is that another reason why Trump then is now trying to bring in the National Guard and then also even threaten that, hey, if it goes to the next level, we're going to bring in the military with these protests?
Yeah, that's a, like, not necessarily that I think he wants to, send the military to American streets, but it's one of those things where all of our foreign adversaries, right, they pile on wherever there's turmoil, they're going to pile on wherever they can. And it's not as much Russia at this point, in my opinion, as it is China, and it is the royals in Europe. And so
we'll have to do China next time, Austin. We'll have to talk about China.
Yeah. So it's a wild situation, and his threat of like using overwhelming force to just go crush everything and to roll the troops in there is more of a posturing for like a foreign adversary sort of a thing, right? Telling people like Xi Jinping, like, if you try this, we're going to send soldiers. And not necessarily because I think he wants to have soldiers in the streets of the United States. It's just that we're expressing to them, look, if you try to pile onto this, we're ready for you. We're not going to let this go too much further. Not necessarily like, oh, I'm going to go kill everyone that's a protester right now, like they're trying to spin it into.
Well, clearly that would be a suicide for his political career. That doesn't make any sense. And clearly he's come out, and his amazing press secretary, who is just killing it. She's like Shira, warrior princess every day, going out there to confront the media. Kaylee, I can't remember her last name, but she did a really good talk about what the whole intention was there behind it. And then it was just, it's amazing to see how the press continually twists it. It's even worse here in Canada, the way they twist it. Like, it's very rare that you find a Canadian that is supporting what's going on with Donald Trump. Most people are completely brainwashed by the media here. But thanks to these kind of operations and this kind of content, we can hopefully wake people up and just say this: look, regardless of what you think of Q, or whether you think Austin is Q or not, or anything like that, I've always said this: we are Q. I am Q. Anybody that's doing this is part of a movement to create a mass awakening to things that have been sort of brushed under the rug for too long, that all this criminality and all these big syndicates and all this human trafficking is allowed to exist because good people do nothing. And if the good people are all misinformed, then we can't even know enough to do that thing that's going to dismantle this criminal enterprise. So I'm on board with anyone that's out there trying to call for justice, call for truth, to expose this evil. I've been working at it tirelessly for 18 years. I know so many other people that have been doing this as well. I hope that those of you who are still in doubt about this whole project will actually go and research it. Go check out Austin's channel. You can go look him up, Austin Steinbart. He's on YouTube. At least he's got videos there in the past. And hopefully you get through this whole FBI investigations that you can get back on the internet. Go check out the posts. Go look at the clock. Go look at the whole thing. Tell me what you think. We're here researching this together. And Austin, man, you've really dropped some major bombs. And I find myself agreeing with what you're saying. It's unbelievable. So thank you so much for spending this time with me. I really hope that we can do this again, because I have a gazillion more questions for you. I think you came across very well here, and it was an honor to have you on the show, man.
Well, thanks for having me. Great to be here. I appreciate you, taking the slings and arrows, helping us get the word out on these real situations that are happening. And it's like you said, we want to be like, we're all Q in the sense of like, we're trying to engage as many people as possible to help us in this effort. Just like in World War II, every single man, woman, and child felt the effects of that. We want everyone to be contributing wherever they can, no matter how little or how much, to moving our country forward. And I think if we can all come together and participate in beating some of these little vampires off our back, that we will really like spiritually be aligned to build an amazing future together. And if you're out there, you want to check out my channel, if you're new to it for the first time, probably the best place to start would be like watch the videos from oldest to newest, just because it kind of is a progression there. Or if you only have time to watch one, I think the best one to watch to really like understand the gist of what we're talking about is it's called Black Ops 101, The Dark Truth About the CIA. That's like kind of the underlying message here, the most important thing I'm trying to get out there. And so yeah, I encourage anyone out there to take a look at that. And I would be happy to come back sometime soon and we can pick it up there.
That would be great. And I'll link that below for everybody. So thank you, Austin. We'll keep in touch. We'll talk again very soon. And thanks to all of those who've tuned in. And I appreciate your feedback. We'll do it again sometime. And I wish you all well in these very, very dark and uncertain times. Let's work together on this. Stay true. And we'll talk next time. Cheers, everyone.